The air in Charleston Harbor is thick enough to chew. It's a heavy, wet blanket of salt, old diesel, and the low-tide funk of pluff mud. It seeps through the cracks of the harbor finch, sticking to my skin, mixing with the smell of scorched butter and old shrimp shells. My feet ache, a dull throb that's worked its way up to my knees. I glance at the brass clock just past 10 on a Tuesday. I'm deep into hour 12 of what was supposed to be an 8-hour shift, but the bills from MUSC don't care about my sleep schedule. My mom's hospital debt is a mountain. I'm just a girl with a tiny shovel, digging. Every extra shift, every double, every table I turn is just one more spoonful of dirt. So I smile, I say, "Of course," right away. I polish silverware until my knuckles are raw, all to keep the lights on in that sterile room, all to keep the machines beeping. The buzz started at the oyster bar. It wasn't loud, it was a vibration, a sudden drop in the room's pressure. I saw Jim, our shucker, freeze, his knife halfway through a difficult oyster. He looked at the hostess. The hostess looked at the door. Her professional smile didn't just fade, it fell off her face. Whispers jumped from table to table. "That's Voss. It's the Rook Circle." The name hit the dining room like a thrown rock. The clatter of forks stopped. The low hum of lawyer and tourist chatter evaporated. The harbor finch isn't a dive, but we aren't a 5-star cathedral either. We get shipping magnates and old money families with their pearls. We don't get men who are the shadows the shipping magnates avoid. We don't get Cashin Voss. He didn't make an entrance. He simply arrived. He eclipsed the doorway, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd been carved from mountains. Their suits were sharp, dark, and utterly useless at hiding the bulk beneath. They didn't scan the room, they cataloged it, they mapped the exits, the sight lines, the potential threats, and the quickest path from the door to the best table. Table 9, the corner booth with the view of the water. My section. Of course. My breath hitched, but I grabbed a water carafe, my hand miraculously steady. The adrenaline of exhaustion was replaced by a different kind, a sharper kind. "Right this way, gentlemen," the hostess stammered, grabbing 3 menus. I moved toward the table. Autopilot engaged. "Good evening. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Cashin Voss didn't look at me. He was shrugging off a cashmere coat, the kind of black that seemed to absorb the dim light in the room. It was damp with the harbor mist. He draped it over the back of the heavy oak booth, and I knew, just from the weight of the fabric, that the coat cost more than my last 6 months' rent. As he slid into the booth, the cuff of his crisp white shirt rode up his forearm, and I saw it. It wasn't the first tattoo I'd seen tonight. Charleston is a port city. Ink is part of the uniform. But this was different. This wasn't a blurry anchor or a faded pinup. This was a thick, dark, precise script of Japanese characters running from his wrist up the inside of his arm, following the line of the radius bone. It was art. Bold. Confident kanji. I ripped my eyes away. "Just water for me," one of the mountains said. The other just shook his head, his eyes fixed on the dining room. Cassian settled, his gaze sweeping the harbor lights. Rum, dark, neat. "Right away, sir." I turned, walked to the bar, and relayed the order. My hands were automatic, but my mind had snagged on those characters. I hadn't tried to read kanji in almost 3 years, not since my old roommate, Yuka, went back to Tokyo. We'd spent 2 semesters sharing a drafty apartment off campus, drinking terrible coffee and drilling flashcards. She wanted to perfect her English for a translation gig. I just wanted to learn something beautiful. Yuka was meticulous, a true artist with a brush. She taught me stroke order, the importance of radicals, the way a single tiny flick of the wrist could change heaven into dog. "Order up, Lila." The kitchen bell dinged. I snapped back. "Order for table 6, a heavy ceramic platter piled high with iced blood clams." I hoisted the tray, my shoulder protesting. I delivered the clams, cleared their appetizer plates, and walked back toward the bar. The rum was waiting, a heavy glass tumbler, amber liquid. I picked it up, along with a napkin, and headed back to table 9. I set the glass down on the dark wood. "Your rum, sir." He nodded, still looking out the window. He reached for the glass, and the low-slung pendant light over the table hit his arm. It illuminated the ink, sharp and black against his skin. And I frowned. I couldn't help it. It was a physical reaction, a betrayal. Yuka's voice was suddenly screaming in my head, laughing as she corrected my homework. No. Leela-chan, that radical is for water, not person you just called the professor a goldfish. The ink on his arm was gorgeous, the work of a master. But it was wrong. Not just slightly off. It was fundamentally, comically wrong. He saw it. His head snapped toward me, his eyes catching my gaze locked on his arm. They were a startling, cold gray, the color of the Atlantic in January, just before a nor'easter. Problem? His voice was a low rumble, not loud, but it cut through the silence. The blood drained from my face. I forced the server smile back into place. No, sir, not at all. I gestured vaguely, my hand fluttering. I was just wondering if you'd care for some pickled ginger some of our guests enjoy the pairing with dark rum. It was a pathetic save. We both knew it. Cassian Voss looked down at his arm, at the script that was supposed to be his identity, and then back up at me. It was a slow, heavy, assessing look, the kind of look that made me feel like I was a bug pinned to a board. In the corner, the live jazz trio, usually just pleasant background noise, seemed to falter. The pianist's hands hovered over the keys. The saxophone player lowered his horn. The chatter in the room, which had nervously resumed, died again. This time, it died completely. The silence was total. Then I heard it. The wind was picking up outside. It rattled the thick window panes and sent the rigging on the docked sailboats tapping against their aluminum masts. Clink, 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 clink. It sounded like bones dancing, like war drums. Cassian Voss slowly, deliberately, began to roll up the sleeve of his white shirt. One careful fold, then another. He wasn't rushing. He was taking his time, revealing the full column of characters. He leaned forward. The movement was slight, but it was charged with coiled energy. He dropped his voice even lower, forcing me to lean in just to hear him. The smell of the rum and something else clean, sharp, expensive hit me. You were staring, he stated. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. My throat felt like it was full of sand. Something funny? This was it. This was the moment. My brain screamed at me. Lie, Lila, say no, sir. It's beautiful. I was just admiring the art. It was the safe play. The play that gets me my tips. The play that lets me walk out of here in one piece and go home. This was Cassian Voss, the man whose nickname was the Rook, because he only moved in straight lines and always took what was in his path. I'd heard the stories at the bar. Men who crossed him didn't just get fired. They became ghost stories whispered on the docks. And he was asking me if his permanent $1 million tattoo was funny. I looked at Morty, my manager, who was hiding behind the service station, his face the color of spoiled milk. He was frantically making a cut-it-out motion, his hands shaking. I should have listened. I should have lied. But I looked back at the ink, and I thought of Yuka. I thought of the hours we spent, the beauty of the language, the precision it demanded, and I thought of the profound insult of getting it so wrong. This wasn't a mistake, it was a mockery. It's not funny, I managed, my voice a thin thread. But he pressed. He didn't blink. I took a shaky breath. I was just a waitress. I was just a tired girl trying to pay her mom's bills. But in that second, I was also Yuka's best student, and I couldn't let the lie stand. But it's not what you think it is. One of the bodyguards shifted, his hand disappearing inside his jacket. Cassian didn't even look at him. He just watched me. I've been told, he said, his voice dangerously smooth, like velvet wrapped around a blade, that it means unyielding fate, suming buku, shukume fukutsu. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. I recognized that phrase. It's a powerful sentiment, but that's not what this says. The entire dining room was holding its breath. I could feel 30, maybe 40 pairs of eyes on my back, a physical weight. Cassian leaned back, a picture of absolute calm, but his gray eyes were burning. They were drilling into me, trying to see if I was bluffing, if I was stupid, or if I was telling the truth. He carefully placed his rum glass on the coaster, a perfect silent placement. "Then what?" he said, spacing the words, giving each one its own block of ice-cold silence. "Does it say?" I looked at the final two characters, the misplaced radical on the yoku, the stroke on the ba that was just plain wrong, changing the entire meaning from a place of destiny to something else. I swallowed, tasting the metallic tang of fear. "That combination," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "Shou Wei Yu Chang. It doesn't mean unyielding fate. It means public bathhouse attendant." The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was absolute. It stretched. It became so heavy I thought the windows would break. Then, Cassian Voss laughed. It wasn't a smirk. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a full, deep, genuine bark of laughter that echoed off the high, dark wood ceilings. It was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a man who hadn't been genuinely surprised in a decade. And it stopped. It stopped as if a switch had been thrown. He looked down at his arm, then back at me. The amusement in his eyes vanished. It was gone, replaced by something flat and cold and sharp as a shard of obsidian, a knife's edge. "A bathhouse attendant," he repeated. He didn't say it to me. He said it to himself. Someone had done this to him. Someone had looked the most dangerous man in the Low Country in the eye, taken his money, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, and branded him with a janitor's job title. And he hadn't known. Until a tired waitress with aching feet and a good memory told him. The bodyguard on his left leaned in, his mouth close to Cassian's ear, whispering something fast and urgent. "Boss, this is a problem. We should take her outside." Cassian didn't look at him. He just lifted one hand, a sharp, dismissive gesture, a gesture that said "shut up" more clearly than any shout. His gaze stayed locked on me. The predator had found a new, fascinating, and utterly confusing mouse. "Sit down," he commanded. I blinked. "Sir, I'm on the clock." "Sit." He gestured, not to the chair across from him, but to the empty space in the booth right next to him. I looked at Morty. He just gave a jerky, terrified nod. "Do whatever he says. Lila, just do it." My legs felt like they were made of wet cement. I slowly, awkwardly, navigated around the table, my blue apron bunched up as I slid onto the expensive leather, keeping a careful distance. Cassian Voss turned his whole body toward me. I was trapped between him and the wall. He leaned in, and the world shrank to the space between us. It was just the smell of rum and the cold fire in his eyes. "Tell me," he said, his voice a quiet storm, "how you know." My hands, hidden beneath the table, are shaking. I press my palms flat against the rough denim of my apron, digging my nails into my legs. The entire dining room has shrunk to the space inside this booth, to the suffocating scent of expensive wool, clean soap, and the sharp tang of the rum on his breath. "How I know," I echo, my voice thin. "You're not an art historian, you're not Japanese, and you're not a tattoo artist. Yet you walk up to my table and tell me the one thing that has been inked into my skin for 5 years as a joke. So, yes, tell me how you know." I swallow, trying to force moisture back into my throat. I had to drop out of college, but before I did, I was on a scholarship track, East Asian Studies. His eyes don't change. They remain locked on mine, assessing, dissecting. "My roommate," I continue, the words tumbling out now. "Her name was Julia. She was from Tokyo, an exchange student. She was brilliant. She wanted to perfect her English, and I needed to learn kanji for my program. So we tutored each other. For 2 years, we spent nights, God, so many nights with flashcards and ink brushes and cheap coffee. She's a traditionalist. She was so strict. She would make me draw the characters 100 times, telling me the balance was everything. that a stroke out of place wasn't just a mistake, it was a different soul. I'm rambling. The fear is making me chatter, trying to build a wall of academic trivia between me and the man sitting next to me. She taught me the radicals, I say, gesturing vaguely. The building blocks, the person radical, the water radical, the speech radical. She said you can't read the word if you don't know the components. And what's on your arm? His gaze is so intense I have to look away. I look down at his forearm, at the bold, black script. If I'm right, he says, his voice a low vibration that I feel in my chest, then someone, somewhere, was very, very wrong. Who? He isn't asking if I'm right. He's accepted it. He's moved on to the hunt. May I ask, my hand hovering? He doesn't answer, just offers his arm. It's solid, warm. The skin is taut over the muscle. I don't touch him. I can't. I just point, my finger trembling slightly, hovering a half-inch above his skin. Here, I whisper, pointing to the character for Yoku. Bath. The artist, they use the water radical on the left, which is correct, but the strokes are connected wrong. They're rushed. It's the kind of shorthand someone uses when they're copying a shape, not writing a word. I move my finger down, but this one, the last character, Jo, or Ba, a place. The radical on the left, it's supposed to be the one for Earth, Tsuchi. It's 3 simple lines, but this is a bastardized version of the clothing radical. It's just wrong, it's gibberish. It's the kind of mistake someone makes if they're trying to copy Japanese, but their native language is Cantonese. The stroke habits are all wrong. I finally pull my hand back, folding it with the other in my lap. It's not just a typo, sir. They built the word out of the wrong pieces. It's a completely different house. He's silent. He pulls his arm back, slowly. He's not looking at me anymore. He's staring at the ink on his own skin. But he's not seeing it. He's seeing the face of the person who put it there. He's seeing the face of the person who commissioned it. A tiny, bitter smile, so small it barely qualifies, touches the corner of his mouth. $500,000, he says, so quietly I barely hear it. I paid $500,000 for a joke. The anger is there. Yes, a cold, deep ocean of it, but just for a fraction of a second as the light from the harbor glints in his eyes. I see something else, a flicker, a shadow passing over that ocean. It's a profound weariness, the look of a man who just had his deepest suspicions confirmed in the worst possible way. The betrayal wasn't new. The proof was, I can't help it, the server in me, the student in me, they both have the same instinct to fix the mistake. I could write it for you. I offer the words out before I can stop them. The correct way, shukume fukutsu. I reach for a cheap cocktail napkin from the metal dispenser on the table. His hand shoots out and stops mine, not grabbing, just a wall. His fingers are warm, his palm calloused. He doesn't hold my hand, he just stops its movement. Not with that. He releases me and reaches inside his dark suit jacket. My breath catches. The bodyguard by the door, the one I'd cataloged as Mountain One, tenses. But Cassian doesn't pull out a weapon. He pulls out a pen. It's a fountain pen, heavy, black resin with a silver nib that catches the light. It looks older than I am, and probably worth more than my car. He unscrews the cap with an audible click and hands it to me. Nib first. Use this. His eyes are back on my face. They're not cold now. They're focused, hot. He's not watching my hand. He's watching my expression. He's reading me, trying to figure out what I'm made of. Someone once taught me patience, he says, almost to himself, his voice distant, rough. Taught me how to wait, how to let the ink settle. My head jerks up. That's not a phrase a tourist uses. That's a reference to the art itself. He didn't just walk in and point to a wall. He knew, or at least he thought he did. He had a connection, someone Japanese, someone who taught him patience. I look across the restaurant. Morty, my manager, is hiding behind the service station, his face a sickly white. He sees me looking and frantically makes a slicing motion across his throat. Stop, shut up, get out, don't engage. I look back at Cassian, at the pen in my hand, at the challenge in his eyes. I give Morty the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I can't. The truth is already on the table. You can't put it back in the box. I take the pen. It's heavy, balanced perfectly. I spread the flimsy, one-ply napkin flat on the dark wood. I steady my breathing. I clear my mind, just like Yuka taught me. I picture the characters. Shukume, Destiny, Fukutsu, unyielding. I set the nib to the paper. The ink flows, black and rich. I draw the strokes, the shelter, the command, the man, the axe. I focus on the balance, the kokoro, the heart in the center of the forms. It's not perfect, it's a cheap napkin. Not rice paper, but it's correct. It has the right soul. I push the napkin toward him. He stares at it and the line of his jaw is rigid. His other hand, the one resting on the table, slowly clenches into a fist, his knuckles turning white. He's seeing the betrayal. He's seeing the face of the one who sold him out. "Hey, Smiley, where's my damn beer?" The voice is loud, sloppy, and it shatters the tension like a thrown brick. I jump, my server reflexes kicking in. It's table 4, a bachelor party. The one in the pink polo shirt, his face flushed with alcohol, is waving his empty glass in the air. "I'm talking to you, sweetheart," he slurs, louder this time. Enjoying the silence he just broke. "My glass has been empty for, 10 minutes. You too busy cozying up to the suits to do your damn job." My face flushes, a hot wave of shame. This is my life. 1 minute, I'm a linguistic detective. The next, I'm Smiley. I start to slide out of the booth, my apron catching. "Excuse me, sir. I'll get that right away." A solid bar of an arm blocks me. Cassian's. He doesn't even look at me. He doesn't look at the drunk. His eyes are still fixed on the 4 characters I just drew. Apologize to her. The words are quiet, almost casual, but they cut through the room like a razor. The drunk at table 4 actually laughs, a wet, ugly sound. "What did you say to me, buddy? I'm the customer. She needs to apologize to me for the lousy service." Cassian Voss finally, slowly, lifts his head. He turns and pins the man at table 4 with that Arctic gray gaze. The air in the room solidifies. "You're mistaken," Cassian says, his voice like chipped ice. "You're a guest in this establishment. She is working, and you will apologize for insulting her. Now." The drunk's friends are tugging at his shirt. "Steve, shut up. Just dude, sit down. It's not worth it." Steve is too drunk, too entitled. Or what, huh? "You gonna send one of your gorillas over here?" Cassian doesn't move a muscle. He doesn't have to. The bodyguard on his right, Mountain 2, who hasn't moved all night, simply shifts. He doesn't stand, he just leans forward into the light. The movement is casual, but it's calculated. His suit jacket falls open, just enough for the low pendant light to glint off the polished dark wood grip of the pistol holstered under his arm. He doesn't touch it. He doesn't look at the drunk. He just smiles, a tiny, thin-lipped smile that doesn't reach his eyes. The color drains from Steve's face. He goes from flushed red to a pasty, sick gray. I can see the sweat pop on his forehead from here. He stammers, slumping back into his chair so fast he almost misses it. Sorry, miss. No offense, my bad." The trouble evaporates. It sinks back into the floorboards, just like that. Cassian turns back to me as if the interruption never happened, as if a man wasn't just silently threatened in the middle of a crowded restaurant. He picks up the napkin. He folds it, once, twice, with meticulous precision, and slips it into the inner breast pocket of his suit, placing his pen next to it. He reaches into his other pocket and pulls out a thin leather wallet. From it, he slides a single card. It's not a credit card. It's made of matte black metal. He catches Morty's eye. Morty. My manager scrambles over, wringing his hands, looking like he's about to faint. "Yes, Mr. Voss, sir. Everything all right?" "This young woman," Cassian says, gesturing to me, "is done for the night." "Sir," I start. Morty just nods, his head bobbing frantically. Yes, Mr. Voss, of course. Right away. Her shift is over, Cashin continues, his voice flat. Pay her for the full 12 hours and add a 500% tip. Morty's eyes bulge. I'm pretty sure he stops breathing. 500? But, sir, I protest, trying to slide out. I can't just leave. The restaurant is I have tables. You can, and you will. He slides the black metal card across the dark wood. It stops right in front of me. His name, Cashin Voss, is engraved in simple, silver letters. I stare at it. Why? I whisper. The fear is back, but it's different now. It's a dizzying, falling sensation. He stands up. The bodyguards stand with him. He puts his coat back on, settling the cashmere on his shoulders. He is an eclipse, blotting out the light. He leans down, just a few inches from my face. I can see the faint, old scar that cuts through his left eyebrow. Because, Lila Moreno, my name tag. He read my name tag. You just put your finger on a raw nerve. You touched a secret I've been chasing. He taps the card with one finger. Now I need you to solve it. He doesn't wait for an answer. He turns, the bodyguards falling into formation, and walks out. The bell over the front door jingles. The damp, salty wind rushes in, pulling the warmth out of the room, and then they are gone. The entire restaurant exhales at once. The sound is a collective, staggered whoosh. The jazz trio immediately, desperately, starts playing again, a fast, frantic bebop. I look down at the card in my hand. It's heavy, cold. Under his name, there's an address. The Blue Coin Hotel, floor 21. My shift is over. My mom's bill's 500%. That's months. I could breathe. I could sleep for a week. I could take this money, throw this card into the harbor, and go back to my life, back to digging my trench. But I know I won't. My hand closes around the cold metal. I'm looking at the card, but I'm seeing a weather map on the evening news, the kind they show just before the hurricane makes landfall. The neat, swirling white lines, the angry red eye. I'm seeing the radar of a storm that's been hovering just off the coast for my whole life. And I know, with absolute gut-wrenching certainty, that it just made landfall. My life just turned. The walk from the Harbor Finch to the Blue Coin Hotel is 12 blocks. 12 blocks of shedding one skin for another. I left the smell of fried shrimp and old beer behind. The heavy, wet wool air of the docks. I walked inland, where the air thinned out and started to smell like jasmine and old, clean money. My server's apron was stuffed in my bag, but I could still feel its phantom weight. My bank account, however, felt astonishingly, terrifyingly light. That 500% tip wasn't a tip. It was an anchor, and I was just waiting to feel the pull of the chain. The Blue Coin lobby was a cathedral of silence. The walls were paneled in shimmering mother-of-pearl, reflecting the low, artful lights like the inside of a billion-dollar oyster. It wasn't just quiet, it was soundproofed. The air smelled of cedar and, I don't know, leather-bound books. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a sick, hollow drum of anxiety. I was a girl in worn-out flats, still smelling faintly of cocktail sauce, standing in a place where people didn't just have money, they were money. The man at the front desk didn't sneer. He didn't have to. He just looked at me with a polite, surgically precise blankness. "I'm here for Cashin Voss," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. "Mr. Voss is expecting you. Miss Moreno." He didn't look at a screen. He didn't pick up a phone. He just knew. "The private elevator to your left. It will only go to his floor. Floor 21. The doors opened directly into a private foyer. There was only one door, a massive slab of dark wood that looked like it belonged on a fortress. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could touch the wood, it swung open. Cashin Voss. He wasn't wearing the suit. He'd changed into a dark gray Henley that fit his shoulders and arms in a way that was far more intimidating than the cashmere coat. The dim, Warm light of the suite, it was lit like a permanent sunset cast shadows under his jaw. He looked less like a boss and more like a predator in his own den. "You came," he said. "It wasn't a question." "You paid for a full shift," I replied. "This feels like part of it." He stepped back, a silent invitation. The suite was breathtaking. A wall of glass looked out over the whole of Charleston Harbor, the bridges strung with lights like scattered diamonds. But the opulence was lost on me. My eyes went straight to the massive dining table. It wasn't set for a meal, it was a command center. Spread across the polished mahogany were high-resolution, clinical photographs of his arm, invoices from shell companies, logs of encrypted messages. "The artist," he said, his voice a low rumble as he joined me at the table. He called himself Ren Akiyama, operated a private invitation-only studio. He did his last session on me 6 years ago. 2 days later, he was gone. My blood went cold. Gone. Vanished. Cassian tapped a file. Studio emptied. Landlord paid off. Bank accounts drained. He ceased to exist. He was a ghost. I tuned out the financial reports. I ignored the invoices. My training, all those late nights with Julia, kicked in. I was drawn to the photographs, macro shots of the ink itself. I leaned in, my server life fading, the student taking over. "You said he spoke perfect Japanese." "Flawless Tokyo dialect?" I shook my head, pointing to one of the close-ups. "He may have spoken it, but he didn't write it. Not natively." Cassian went absolutely still, his focus narrowing on me. "Explain." This is why it's wrong," I said, my voice gaining a confidence I hadn't felt in years. "He didn't make this mistake because he was a bad artist. He made it because he was Chinese." "How can you know that?" "Julia, my friend from Tokyo. She tutored Chinese students who were trying to learn Japanese. It's a common thing. They share many characters, the kanji, but the muscle memory, the stroke order, it's completely different. It's like listening to someone with a perfect American accent who still spells color with a U." I tapped the glass on a photo showing the second-to-last character. "This radical here," I said, tracing the BF radical, fu, on the side. It looks like a set of steps. When someone taught in Japan writes this, it's 2 separate, precise strokes, a curve, then a vertical line. But look, he wrote it as one continuous, fluid motion. It's a classic Chinese-taught shortcut. He wasn't writing Japanese. He was copying it. He was mimicking the shapes, but his hand was thinking in Cantonese. I looked up at him. The air in the room was electric. You weren't tattooed by a Japanese master named Ren Akiyama. You were tattooed by a very skilled Cantonese forger who was probably taught how to copy the script by a mid-level Chinese tutor. Cassian stared at the photograph, his jaw working. He wasn't breathing. He was just watching the pieces of his past realign into a new, ugly picture. When he finally looked at me, the coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a sharp, assessing heat. It was the look of a master craftsman who had just found a very specific, very rare tool. "You see the seams," he said, his voice quiet. "The little things." "I see what's wrong," I corrected him. "It's a different skill." He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. The movement pulled the Henley tight across his chest. "Does any of this scare you, Lila?" The question was a test, a pin drop in the silent room. I had to give him the truth. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking but my spine straight. I'm terrified. I'm on the 21st floor of a hotel I could never afford, talking to you about a man who vanished. I'm pretty sure I'm an accessory to something." I took a breath, forcing the words out. "But for the last 3 years, ever since I dropped out, I've been invisible. I'm sweetheart, I'm honey, I'm hey, you. I've had men, drunk men, stupid men like that guy at table 4, treat me like I'm a talking piece of furniture, like I'm not even there." I met his gaze, and I held it. I hate being underestimated more than I'm scared of this. A slow, dangerous smile crept onto his face. It was the first one I'd seen, and it changed everything about him. It was devastating. "Good," he said, "because I don't need a waitress. I need an analyst, I need that brain of yours." He pushed off the table and walked to the wall of glass, looking down at the dark, moving water of the harbor. That artist didn't just vanish. He was sent. He was a weapon sent to do this. He gestured to his arm, to brand me, to make me a joke. He turned back, his face hard in the moonlight. "The money I had Morty give you, that was just a retainer. I want to hire you." My stomach did a flip. Hire me to do what I found the mistake. "No, you found the result." He walked back, his intensity a physical force. "I need you to find the source. I need you to trace that Cantonese shortcut, and I need you to find the original meaning." I frowned, but unyielding fate. "That was a lie, too," he bit out. "The phrase I gave them, the one I wanted on my arm, it was something else, something personal. They twisted it. They hired a forger to translate it into a joke, and then hired another forger to ink it onto my skin. I want to know what I actually asked for." This was it, the precipice. It was offering me a way out, not just from the Finch, from the debt, from the mountain. The money, my God, the money he must be talking about. It was enough. Enough to heal my mom, enough to be a person again. "I'll do it," I said. He nodded, as if he'd known I would. "But I have conditions." His eyebrows shot up. I could tell, in that one tiny movement, that no one gave Cassian Voss conditions. "One," I said, holding up a finger, my hand surprisingly steady. "This is a job, a transaction. I'm not your property, and I'm not in your debt. I want my fee, all of it transferred to my bank account before we leave this room. Not cash, a wire transfer. I want a clean ledger. I'm an employee." He stared at me for a beat, then nodded. "Done." "Two." I held up a second finger. "I'm your analyst. I read things. I look at pictures. I connect dots. I do not get involved in the harbor insurance part. You hired my brain. You get my brain. You keep me out of the violence. I don't want to see it." "I have men for the violence," he agreed, his voice flat. "And three," I finished, my voice dropping. "When I find the source, and I find the original phrase, I'm done. The contract is over. I'm out. I take my money and I go back to my life." He studied me, his gray eyes searching my face. "Agreed," he said finally, "with one small problem." "What?" "By the time this is over, you won't want to go back to your old life." He pulled out his phone, his thumb moving quickly. "Account and routing number?" I told him. I watched as he typed, my own phone, buried in my purse. Buzzed a second later. I pulled it out, a notification from my banking app. I opened it. The number I almost dropped the phone, it wasn't a salary. It was a ransom. It was a never work in a restaurant again number. It was Mom gets the best doctors, forever money. I took a shaky breath and put the phone away. The deal is made. Good. He went to a drawer in a heavy sideboard and pulled something out. It was a small, dark object on a simple leather cord. He held it out to me. It was a chess piece, carved from dark, polished wood, a rook. "You're right," he said. "You won't be in the violent part. But my associates and my enemies, they'll notice you're with me. They'll ask questions." He pressed it into my palm. It was smooth and still warm from his hand. "Wear this under your shirt if you're ever in trouble or in a place you shouldn't be, and I'm not there. Just let them see it. A hand on your chest. Just let it be seen. It's a key. It will open doors. It will make people polite. A key, a pass, a shield." "Where are we going?" I asked, slipping the cord over my head, the wood settling against my sternum. "The man who introduced me to the ghost. The man who set up the appointment." We didn't take the main elevator. We took the service one, down to a private sub-basement. The garage was cavernous, silent and filled with cars that looked more like weapons than transportation. He led me to a low, black coupe that seemed to drink the light. It was all angles and menace. He opened the door for me. The engine started not with a roar, but with a deep, menacing thrum that I felt in my bones. We pulled out of the silent garage and onto the dark streets, heading away from the historic district, back toward the industrial glow of the port. The car was silent inside, a sealed capsule. The Rook Circle, I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue. Your harbor insurance. His profile was stark in the glow of the dashboard. I could see the faint scar through his eyebrow. The big shipping conglomerates, they bleed the independent lines dry. They fix berthing fees. They lose cargo. They create slowdowns. They're bullies. We just level the playing field. We make sure the little guys get a fair shot. It was the most beautiful, terrifying justification for a protection racket I had ever heard. So this tattoo, I said, it wasn't just a random insult. It was a move by a competitor to make you look weak, a bathhouse attendant. You see the seams, Lila, he said again, and a thread of dark satisfaction was in his voice. Yes. The silence in the car stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. The person who taught you patience, I asked, my voice softer than I intended. The Japanese connection. Who was she? I saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel. Just a fraction, but he did it. He was silent for a long time as we merged onto the high-span bridge. The lights of the harbor spread out below us like a fallen constellation. Her name is not important, sir, he said, his voice rough. She was an interpreter in Yokohama a long time ago. He kept his eyes on the road, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. I was different then, he said, almost to himself. All iron and sharp edges. I thought patience was just a word for being slow. She taught me how to wait, how to move around an obstacle instead of just breaking it. He took a breath. She changed me from iron to water. What happened to her? I whispered. She vanished, he said, the same flat, empty word he'd used for the tattoo artist. One day, she was just gone. The wind howled outside, buffeting the low car, a high, lonely sound against the glass, and in that moment, a strange, sharp ache bloomed in my chest. It was a fierce, sudden, and deeply unwanted need to know this man. Not the boss, not the rook, but the man who had been iron, the man who had been turned to water by a ghost. I wanted to know about the cracks under all that steel. He took the next exit, descending from the bridge into the part of town the tourists never see. The Riverline Night Market. The lights here weren't elegant gas lamps. They were buzzing, flickering neon in a dozen languages. He pulled the coupe into a dark alley slick with restaurant grease and steam, killing the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. The man who arranged the meeting, Cassian said, his face half in shadow, half in the red glow of a billiards sign. He's not a ghost. He's just nocturnal. His name is Silas. He looked at me. First stop is his parlor, Pearl Static. Stay in the car, lock the door. No, I said. He turned his head fully toward me, his eyes dark. No. That wasn't the deal, I said, my hand instinctively going to my chest, my fingers closing over the warm wood of the rook. You hired my brain. My brain is attached to my body. I go where it goes. I need to see his face. I need to hear how he talks about Akiyama. I need to see if his Cantonese is as good as his Japanese. Cassian stared at me for a long, hard second. I could see the calculations in his eyes. Then, that slow, dangerous smile returned. All right, analyst, he said. Come on, but don't touch anything and stay behind me. I step out of the coupe, and the alley swallows me. The air is different here, thick and heavy, but not with the harbor's salt. This air is a chemical soup sizzling garlic from a backdoor kitchen, damp cardboard, and the sharp, metallic tang of ozone bleeding from a dozen flickering neon signs. The red pulse of a billiards sign paints the wet cobblestones in blood-colored waves. Pearl Static is nothing but a gray steel door, set into the brick. No name, no sign, no handle, just a dark, square peephole. It looks abandoned, but I can see it, a thin, electric blue line of light seeping from under the threshold, a UV sterilizer. Someone's definitely inside. Cassian walks to the door. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't look around. He lifts a gloved fist and raps on the steel. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, measured beats, a pause. Knock, knock. 2 sharp, quick ones, A code. The sound is flat, deadened by the door. We wait. The only sound is the clatter-clank of a massive ventilation fan from the restaurant next door, dumping steam into the alley. A metal scrape comes from the other side. The peephole slides open. I see a single dilated eye, wide with fear. "We're closed," a young, muffled voice says. "Seriously, come back tomorrow." Cassian says nothing. He just stands there, a column of shadow in the red light. The silence stretches. He gives a tiny, almost imperceptible nod in my direction. "Oh, right." My hand is trembling, but I force it up to my chest. My fingers close around the warm, smooth wood of the rook amulet under my shirt. I pull it out, letting it swing free on its leather cord. The eye in the peephole blinks, then it widens. The metal slot snaps shut so fast it clicks. I hear the thunk of a heavy deadbolt being pulled, then another. The steel door groans open, just 6 inches. The man who opened it, he's a kid. He can't be more than 20, maybe 21. His hair is a shock of electric green. A respirator hangs around his neck, and his arms are a vibrant sleeve of new school tattoos. His eyes are fixed on the amulet in my hand. He looks from the wooden rook to my face, and then to the man beside me. All the color drains from his skin. "Mr. Voss," he whispers, his voice cracking. He swallows hard. Silas isn't seeing anyone." "He'll see me." Cassian says. His voice isn't loud, but it pushes the kid back like a physical shove. He moves, and the kid stumbles backward into the room. We're in. The shop smells like a hospital, but with a rotten sweet edge of old cigarettes and green soap. The blue UV light in the corner buzzes, making my teeth look a strange, ghostly white. The walls are covered, floor to ceiling, in tattoo flash sheets of designs. Dragons, skulls, pinup girls. He's in the back. The kid stammers, wringing his hands. "Look, he just handles the books, please. He didn't do anything." Cassian's gaze sweeps the room, cataloging, dismissing. But my eyes are drawn to a corkboard in the corner, right under a flickering neon open sign that's missing its O. It's a kanji board, a full-page spread of Japanese characters and their supposed English meanings. My stomach clenches. It's a train wreck. "Do you have a loop?" I ask the kid, my voice sharp. "A magnifying glass, for checking needle settings." He points, still shaking, to a steel workstation littered with tools. "There." I grab it and walk to the board. Cassian watches me, his focus shifting from the room to my face. "What?" "This is a graveyard," I murmur. I raise the loop to the sheets. They're cheap thermal copies, the ink blurry, the strokes heavy and uncertain. "It's all wrong. This isn't just a mistake. It's fraud." I point to a large character. "This is goat, not eternal love. This is just gibberish. I think they copied it from a ramen packet." "Where's Silas?" Cassian's voice cuts the air. A curtain of wooden beads shivers in the back of the room. A man steps out. He's thin and pale, like something that lives under a rock. He's wearing an expensive silk robe, but it's stained and wrinkled. He's holding a tablet. He sees Cassian, and he freezes. The tablet slips from his fingers, clattering onto the linoleum. "Voss," he breathes. I wasn't expecting the shops closed. "You booked Ren Akiyama for me 6 years ago." Cassian's voice is flat, conversational. It's terrifying. Six years ago." Silas forces a wet, ugly laugh. "Voss, that was just a referral. Business. I took my finder's fee, 10%, that's it. That's all I know." "Where did you find him?" I interrupt. Silas's eyes snap to me. "Who the hell is this?" "She's the analyst," Cassian says. "She asked you a question." Silas's gaze darts between us. He's a cornered animal. I didn't find him. They found me. This group. They said they were consultants. They wanted a top-tier, discreet artist for a high-profile client. They said Akiyama was the best in the world. They paid the commission was insane. I'm still scanning the board, the loop pressed to my eye, and then I see it. At the bottom of a sheet of badly drawn koi fish, a tiny logo, a stylized crescent moon over a bridge. This, I say, tapping the paper. Crescent Eastern Institute. Is that them? Silas visibly sags, a wave of relief washing over him. Yes, the Crescent Bureau. That's them, that's the one. Cultural consultants. They handled everything. The booking, the deposit, the cleanup. My blood runs cold. Cleanup. When Akiyama was done, Silas says, talking too fast now. When he finished your sessions, they came in. They packed up his kit. They paid my lease, all of it a year in advance. In cash. Told me to forget the name. So I did. I mean, wouldn't you... I look at Cassian. His face is carved from granite. Crescent Bureau, he says, tasting the name. He's not looking at Silas. He's looking at something far away. I know that name. His voice is a low, deadly rumble. We've seen it on shipping manifests. A shell. A ghost company. He turns his head, and his cold, gray eyes lock onto Silas. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. You're a money launderer, Silas, and 6 years ago, he says, you laundered me. No, Silas squeaks, backing up until he hits the wall. I didn't know, I swear to God, Voss, it was just a referral. The Crescent Bureau, Cassian continues, thinking aloud, his voice like grinding stones, is a known front, a money laundering channel for the Marrow Syndicate. The name hangs in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. The green-haired kid behind me makes a small, terrified sound. Marrow, I repeat, the name tasting like ash. My competition, Cassian says, his eyes flat. He wants the South Port, he wants my contracts, he wants my head. He looks down at his arm. The arm I know is covered by his sleeve. This wasn't an insult. It was a weapon, a setup. A setup for what, I ask? For this, he says. For someone like you to finally spot the joke. For me to get angry, to get loud, to react, to draw blood. My eyes are still scanning the walls. I'm not a fighter. I'm an analyst. I look for the seams. I find one. Tacked to a plasterboard divider, half hidden by a girly calendar, is a single, yellowed, handwritten note. Cassian. I walk over. It's written in Japanese, or it's trying to be. It's a schedule note, meet tomorrow, Soko Pier. But the word Soko Warehouse, it's misspelled. The characters are wrong. It's a homonym. It's the kind of mistake you make if you type SHOKO on an American keyboard. But you have a Chinese pinyin input method active. It's not the Japanese character for warehouse. It's a phonetically similar, but meaningless, Chinese character. What is it? Cassian is at my shoulder. It's from your ghost, Akiyama, I say, my heart hammering. He left this note for Silas. Probably, but Silas can't read Japanese. No one can. It's gibberish. Translate it. I can't, it's not a word, but I know what he meant to write. He meant Shoko Pier. Pier 9, but he typed it wrong. He used a Chinese keyboard input. This confirms it, 100%. The man who tattooed you is not Japanese. Cassian looks at Silas, who looks like he's about to be sick. You're done, Silas, Cassian says. Please, Silas begs, sliding down the wall. Don't. Get out, now. Cassian orders. Pack a bag, go to Florida, go to Ohio. I don't care. If I ever see you in Charleston again, I'll finish this conversation. Silas and the kid don't need to be told twice. They scramble out the back door, the sound of their feet pounding on the alley steps. Cassian turns to me, the red light from the alley painting his face. Shoko Pier, the trail is hot. Let's go, I say. We step back out into the alley, the steam from the vent, the smell of garlic, the pulsing red light. It all hits me again. And it happens. It happens fast. They're not assassins. They're thugs, 4 of them, stepping out from the shadows by the dumpsters, from the dark alcoves. They move to block both ends of the alley. They're all wearing identical, cheap gray raincoats, the hoods pulled up, their faces hidden. One of them, the one closest to us, is holding a smartphone. The camera light is on. He's framing Cassian. Another one, the biggest, is holding a metal baseball bat. He taps it lightly, against the wet cobblestones. Tap, tap, tap. "Evening, Voss," the one with the bat says, his voice a low country drawl. "Heard you were in the neighborhood. Heard you were looking for a bathhouse attendant." This is it, the setup, the trap Cassian just predicted. They want this on camera. They want the rook, the boss, to lose his mind, to pull a gun, to start a bloody, messy brawl with 4 street-level operators. They want the noise. They want the clip that will make him a laughingstock on the docks by morning. Cassian's hand doesn't go to the gun I know he has. He doesn't even square his shoulders. He just gives me a sharp sideways glance. "Stay by the car." "Hey, Rook," the cameraman taunts, his voice high and nervous. "What's wrong? Your new girlfriend doesn't like the ink, want us to fix it for you." They're poking the bear. They're begging for the clip. Cassian moves. It's not a movie. It's not a spinning kick. It's what he said. He's water. The man with the bat swings, a wide, sloppy arc aimed at Cassian's head. Cassian isn't there. He steps inside the swing, using the man's own momentum against him. He uses the slick, wet steps of the kitchen entrance we'd just passed. There's a wet crack as Cassian's elbow connects with the man's jaw. There's a heavy thud as Cassian pivots, using the man's falling body as a shield against the second guy who lunges. It's brutal, it's efficient, and it's shockingly silent. He's not yelling, he's not grunting, he's just dismantling them. The cameraman is backpedaling, his hands shaking, trying to keep it all in frame. The third guy pulls a knife, a short, ugly blade. He lunges at Cassian's back. I don't think I react. I'm standing by the open door of the tattoo parlor. On the steel workstation right inside, there's a tray, a metal tray piled high with sterilized, individually wrapped tattoo needles. I grab the entire tray, and I hurl it sidearm like a discus. It's a clumsy, desperate throw, but it's perfect. The heavy steel tray clatters against the brick wall, right next to the knife guy's head. 100 foil-wrapped needles scatter across the wet cobblestones like a burst of silver shrapnel. The knife guy stops. He flinches at the sound, instinctively raising an arm to block his face. It's all Cassian needs. He pivots, one smooth, liquid motion. He grabs the man's wrist, twists. A sickening snap echoes in the alley. The knife skitters away. The cameraman is the only one left standing. He's staring, his phone trembling. He just filmed his entire crew being taken apart in less than 10 seconds, without a single gunshot. A black sedan, not our coupe, screeches to a halt at the end of the alley, blocking the only exit. The doors fly open. It's the mountains, the bodyguards from the restaurant. They weren't late. They were the cleanup crew. They pour out, all dark suits and grim efficiency. The cameraman knows he's lost. He turns to run. As he turns, he drops something, a tiny black rectangle, as thin as a credit card. He scrambles for it, but one of the bodyguards is already there. The bodyguard puts a single, polished black dress shoe on it. The cameraman looks up, defeated. He abandons the hard drive and sprints away, vanishing into the steam and the neon of the market. Silence falls on the alley, just the sound of the rain, the sizzling neon, and the low groans of the 3 men on the ground. Cassian is barely breathing hard. He just adjusts the cuff of his Henley. The bodyguard retrieves the black rectangle from under his shoe. He wipes it clean on his suit pants and hands it to Cassian. "Boss, external SSD. Looks like high capacity." Cassian looks at the drive. Then he looks at me. We're back in the coupe. The doors are shut, sealing us in sudden, absolute silence. My heart is trying to hammer its way out of my chest. I can hear the blood roaring in my ears. Cassian plugs the thin hard drive into a port in the center console. An interface pops up on the car's main screen. Drive locked, 256-bit encryption. Of course. That was, I start, my voice shaking so hard I can't form words. They had a knife. You didn't even... What? He says, his eyes fixed on the screen. You didn't shoot them, I whisper. He had a knife. They had a bat. I know you're armed. Why didn't you use your gun? He finally looks at me. The adrenaline is still burning in his eyes, a silver-gray fire. "Because they had a camera," he says simply. "Marrow doesn't want me dead. Not yet. He wants me ruined. He wants me on YouTube, brawling in an alley like a common thug. He wants noise. He wants a show." He looks back at the screen. "Today, silence has to beat the noise. We fight with information, not bullets." He starts the engine. The deep, heavy thrum fills the cabin. "The drive is locked," he says, "for now, but we have what we need, Shoko Pier." He pulls the car out of the alley, the headlights cutting through the steam, and heads back toward the water. "I'll take you home," he says, his voice flat. "It's not a suggestion. It's a command. This part it gets rough. Your contract is fulfilled. You found the link. You're done." He's offering me the out. The one I demanded. I can take the money. I can go home, lock my door, call my mom, and pretend none of this ever happened. I can go back to my life. I look out the window at the passing neon lights. The city looks different. It's not just a collection of streets. It's a game board. And I can finally see the pieces. "No," I say. He glances at me, his brow furrowed. "No, I'm giving you your out. The one you demanded, take it." "You're wrong," I say. "My contract isn't fulfilled. I was hired to find the source and the original meaning. All I've found is the middleman. The trail is hot now. That note, Shoko Pier, that's where the ghost, Akiyama, was going. That's where we'll find the real language. The next clue. If we wait, it's gone." I turn in my seat to face him. The cabin is dark, lit only by the dashboard. "We go to Shoko Pier. Now, both of us." Cassian drives for a full minute. The only sound is the thwack, thwack, thwack of the windshield wipers. He's looking at me, but it's a different kind of look. The assessment is gone. The calculation is gone. It's not heat. It's respect, a genuine, startled, sharp-edged respect. "You're not as weak as you think you are, Lila Moreno," he says, his voice rough. A small, hard smile touches my lips. My heart is still pounding, but the fear is gone. It's been burned away by something else, something clean and sharp. "Being underestimated," I say, "doesn't mean I don't have a strategy. Now, drive." He smiles, the real one, the devastating one, and he hits the accelerator. Shoko Pier wasn't just a pier, it was a graveyard. Pier 9, the one the note had pointed to, was nothing but a line of rotted pilings disappearing into the black. Choppy water. At the very end, isolated from the shore, sat a massive, rusting cluster of abandoned shipping containers, stacked 3 high like forgotten, colossal coffins. The air, already heavy with the electric charge of the coming storm, suddenly turned violent. The wind didn't just pick up, it screamed, a solid wall of force coming in off the Atlantic. Then the rain started. It wasn't a drizzle. It was a deluge. Icy pellets that hit like shrapnel. Cassian didn't even look for a lock to pick on the nearest container. He went straight to it, pulling a key from his pocket. This was one of a safe house. He put his shoulder to the massive, groaning metal door, shoving it open just wide enough for us to slip inside, then slammed it shut behind us. The boom of the door was absolute, a final, metallic judgment, but it was immediately swallowed by the roar of the storm outside. We were in total darkness. The air was frigid, thick with the smell of old iron, rust, and a faint chemical tang. I heard a click, then a snap, and a battery-powered lantern flooded the small space with a harsh, clinical, white light. The container was empty, save for a few wooden crates and a heavy tarpaulin folded in the corner. The rain was a deafening, chaotic drum against the metal roof, just inches above our heads. The entire container seemed to vibrate, the walls groaning as the wind tried to tear it from its moorings. It felt like being trapped inside a drum during a rock concert. I found a small, high slit near the ceiling, a crack in the metal, and peered out. The harbor lights I'd seen from the hotel, the ones that looked like scattered diamonds, were gone. In their place were frantic, shattered beams of light, tossed around on a black, white-capped, furious ocean. The adrenaline that had kept me warm since the alley fight evaporated all at once, leaving a cold that went straight to my bones. The dampness from the alley, combined with the refrigerated metal box we were now in, was too much. I started to shiver. It was a small, uncontrollable tremor at first, but then my teeth began to chatter, a humiliating, audible rattle in the small, loud space. Cassian was by the door, his body tense, listening, not to me, but to the storm, as if gauging its strength. He turned, and his gaze snagged on my vibrating shoulders. He didn't sigh, he didn't ask, he just moved. He hooked his thumbs into the collar of his heavy Henley and pulled it over his head in one fluid motion, leaving him in a thin, dark undershirt that clung to his shoulders and chest. The defined muscles, the sheer utility of his build, were far more intimidating than any suit. He stepped toward me. I instinctively recoiled, but he just held out the shirt. It was still warm from his body heat. "You're shaking," he stated. It wasn't an observation. It was a problem he was solving. "I'm fine," I lied, my teeth clicking. He didn't argue. He just stepped closer, and I was suddenly aware of how small the container really was. He was an eclipse. Blotting out the lantern light, he draped the heavy, warm cotton over my shoulders. It enveloped me immediately. It smelled of him, that clean, sharp scent I'd noticed in the restaurant, like expensive soap, cedar, and something else. Something like static electricity. It was more than a shirt. It was armor. "Thank you," I stammered, pulling it tight around my neck. His hands rested on my shoulders for a beat, his palms heavy, the warmth soaking through the fabric and into my skin. "It's not just the cold," he said, his voice a low rumble under the drumming rain. His fingers moved, just slightly, brushing against the damp strands of hair that had stuck to my neck. It was a light, almost accidental touch, but it wasn't. I froze. His hand paused, his fingertips just grazing the skin of my nape. It was a touch that lasted 1, 2, 3 seconds a lifetime. My skin prickled, a completely different kind of shiver, one that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then his hands were gone. He stepped back, putting a safe, respectable distance between us. I turned to face him, pulling the shirt around me like a shield. He leaned against the corrugated metal wall, his arms crossed over his chest, his own skin exposed to the cold, our breath fogged in the air, 2 plumes of white vapor in the harsh lantern light. The light was unforgiving. It caught the high planes of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, and it illuminated the scar. Not the one by his eyebrow, another one, a thin, white line that ran from just under his jawbone down his neck, disappearing under the collar of his undershirt. It was old, but it hadn't been a clean cut. It was jagged at the edges. "The alley," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the enclosed space. "You knew that was a trap. The camera, the Marrow Syndicate. You knew they were coming." "I knew Marrow wanted noise," he said, his eyes fixed on the sliver of light from the crack. "I didn't know when he'd try to make it." "And the scar," I blurted, the words out before I could stop them. I pointed to my own jaw. "That wasn't a fight. That was an ambush. Wasn't it?" His eyes snapped to mine. The gray ice of the Atlantic was back, frigid and dangerous. I had overstepped. I had read a seam that was meant to stay hidden, and he was about to shut me out. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, the words tripping over each other. That's none of my business. The contract. I'm just the analyst. I'll just—" "Yokohama," he said. The word was flat, dead. It cut right through my apology. He pushed off the wall, pacing the 3 steps to the other side of the box, staring at the groaning metal as if he could see through it. It was a long time ago, 6, maybe 7 years, before the Rook Circle was what it is. I was just iron then, all edges. He let out a harsh breath, the vapor clouding his face. I was making a deal for a new shipping lane, my first big solo move. I was arrogant. I thought I was untouchable. The rain drummed, thwack, thwack, thwack. "She was my interpreter," he continued. his voice so low I had to strain to hear it over the storm. The one I told you about, the one who taught me patience. She was my anchor, the only person in that entire city I trusted. He stopped, his back to me. I was set up by my own partner, the man who brought me over. He sold me out to the local Yakuza. He told them where I'd be, that I'd be carrying the payment. They weren't there to negotiate. He unconsciously touched his jaw, right on the line of the scar. She saw it coming. She read the room before I did. She tried to talk them down. She stepped in front of me. She used their own formal language trying to de-escalate, but they weren't there to talk. He closed his eyes, his voice turning to gravel. This was meant for my throat, a message. She took the cut that was meant for me. He turned back to me, and his eyes were raw, stripped of all their defenses. In the chaos, my partner got the money. The Yakuza got their tribute, and I was left bleeding in an alley, branded a fool. And her, I whispered, though I already knew the answer. She vanished, he said. The same flat, empty word he'd used for the tattoo artist. By the time I got clear, she was just gone, like a ghost. The story hung in the air, heavy and toxic, mixing with the smell of rust, the betrayal, the violence, the vanishing. It was all a pattern. The tattoo wasn't the first move. It was just the latest echo of a wound that had never closed. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't my fear or his authority. It was shared. I wasn't the analyst. He wasn't the boss. We were just two people in a metal box, listening to the world try to tear itself apart outside. I walked toward him. He watched me, wary, as if I might shatter. I stopped, and very gently, I reached out, not for him, for his arm, the one with the ink. He flinched, but he let me. I pushed the sleeve of his undershirt up, bearing the bold, black, wrong characters. "This is what Marrow used," I said softly. "The echo of that betrayal. He knew this wound was still open. He knew this would make you not iron, not water, just broken." "It almost did," he whispered, his voice rough. My fingers traced the outline of the last character, the one that was supposed to mean unyielding. But it's not unyielding fate. It's not bathhouse attendant. It's just ink, I said. It's just a scar, like the one on your neck. It only has the power you give it. I looked up at him. "Do you still have the napkin?" He looked confused. Then his hand fumbled at the pocket of the Henley I was wearing. I felt his fingers brush the fabric over my ribs. He pulled it out. My writing. Suming Buku. "The last character," I said, pointing. "Fukutsu, unyielding, the part they corrupted." I held up my hand, curling my fingers as if holding a brush. When Yuka taught me, she said you don't draw the word, you become it, to write unyielding. Your hand has to be unyielding. Your spirit has to be unyielding. I took his hand, his big, calloused, dangerous hand. It was cold. I curled his fingers around the imaginary brush. "Hold it straight," I murmured, "from the shoulder. The stroke, it has to be a single, deliberate act, not a sketch, a commitment." I guided his hand through the air, drawing the complex character. I felt the tension in his muscles, the resistance. He was fighting the motion. "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Not iron, you're trying to break it. Be water, fluid, but unstoppable. Let it flow." I made him do it again, and again. The air between us was thick with concentration. His breathing deepened. He wasn't fighting me anymore. He was learning. He was letting me in. I stopped. My hand was still holding his. His hand was still poised in the air. We were close. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. The distance, the careful line between boss and employee, had snapped. It bent and distorted until it was meaningless. I was wearing his shirt. He was holding my hand. I looked up. His gaze wasn't cold. It wasn't assessing. It was searching. I could see his chest rising and falling, a steady, deep rhythm. His eyes dropped to my mouth. It was a question, the loudest, clearest question I'd ever heard, and it was asked in total silence. He didn't move. He wouldn't. He was iron again, but this time it was a magnificent, terrifying control. He was waiting. He was giving me the choice. My heart was a trapped bird, beating against my ribs. This was insane. This was Cassian Voss, a killer, a man who lived in a world of shadows and violence. This was the man who had bought my silence with a 500% tip. And I was terrified. But for the first time tonight, I wasn't terrified of him. I gave a single, tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He leaned in. It was impossibly slow. It gave me 1,000 chances to pull away, to turn my head, to laugh and break the spell. I didn't. The first touch was hesitant, just a soft pressure of his lips against mine. It wasn't a demand, it was a discovery. It was a question. And I answered. I leaned into him, just a fraction, and his mouth opened over mine. It was deep, it was slow, and it was achingly sad. It tasted of 6 years of betrayal from Yokohama, of the insult of the ink, of the brutal, silent violence in the alley. It was all of that, but underneath, it was something else. It was relief. His hands came up, but they didn't go to my waist. They didn't pull me into him. They rested, gently, on my shoulders. His thumbs tracing the line of my collarbone through his shirt. It was the most respectful, most careful kiss I had ever had. It wasn't about power. It was about connection. It was an unspoken promise. I see you. I won't break you. He pulled back, but only an inch. Our foreheads touched. We were breathing the same air. I tasted salt on his lips, from the storm, from me. A small, breathless laugh escaped me, salty. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. The harbor. It gets into everything. He stayed there, his eyes closed, just breathing. Thank you, he whispered, his voice rough. For what, the language lesson? For that, he said. But back at the Finch, in that loud, crowded dining room, everyone else in my life is either scared of me or trying to get something from me. You just told me the truth. My free hand, the one that wasn't holding his, found its way to his chest. I splayed my fingers over his heart. Under the thin undershirt, his skin was warm. His heartbeat, it wasn't the frantic hammering of the fight. It was slow, steady, slower than mine, slower than the rain. In that moment, I understood what his interpreter had taught him. He wasn't iron. He truly was water. He had learned to wait. He had waited for me to answer. He had waited for me to nod. This man of absolute power was capable of absolute patience. We slid down, leaning against the cold metal wall, but the shared warmth of his shirt and our proximity kept the cold at bay. We just sat, side by side, listening to the storm begin to subside. The drumming on the roof lessened to a steady, rhythmic pat, pat, pat. I hate this pier, he said into the quiet. Because of Marrow, because it's a ghost. No, because it's a waste. He gestured out at the blackness. All this, the harbor, it's the lifeblood of this city. And kids' grow up here, on these streets, and all they see are the ugly parts, the rust, the crime. They don't see the history, the majesty of it. I looked at him. His profile was sharp in the lantern light. I've always wanted, he started, then stopped. He looked embarrassed, actually embarrassed. What? To open a library, he said, the words coming out in a quiet rush. A maritime library, right here, on one of these old piers. Clean it up, fill it with books on navigation, on shipbuilding, on the history of trade, a place where the kids from the tough neighborhoods, the kids like me, could come, a place to learn, to see that the water isn't just a barrier, it's a road. He had never told anyone. I knew it instantly. This was his secret. The iron boss who dreamed of building a library for wayward teenagers. My scholarship, I found myself saying, the words tasting like rust in my mouth, the one I had to drop. It was for that, to be a curator, to work in a museum in Tokyo, to translate old maritime texts. He turned his head, his gray eyes bright in the dimness. When I got that money from you tonight, I admitted, my voice dropping to a whisper. The wire transfer, my first thought was, I can pay off Mom's bills. But my second thought was, I could reapply. I could finish. He didn't make the offer. He didn't say, I'll pay for it. That would have been too easy. That would have made me his property. That would have broken our contract. Instead, he reached out and took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. It was a firm, solid grip. Marrow, the Crescent Bureau, the ghost who tattooed me, they're a cancer, he said, his voice a low, hard vow. They're a risk, a danger to everything. To my circle and now, because of me, to you. He squeezed my hand. I can't promise you money. Lila, that's not the deal. But I can promise you this. We're going to clean this up. We're going to cut this cancer out. And when it's done, when the board is clear, you'll be free to choose whatever path you want, whether it's Tokyo or a pier in Charleston. It was a promise better than money. It was a promise of a future. A low, deep bwa-wah vibrated through the metal container. A ship's horn, long and low. It wasn't a warning, it was an arrival. We both looked up. The rain had stopped. The only sound was the steady drip, drip, drip of water falling from the container roof onto the pavement. The storm had broken. Cassian stood up in one fluid motion. He was the boss again. He pulled me to my feet, his grip still firm. It's over, I said, holding out his shirt. No, he said, gently pushing my hand away, leaving the shirt on my shoulders. It's just beginning. The trail is hot. He went to the door. He didn't throw it open. He just listened. He cracked it, just an inch, surveying the pier. The air that slipped in was cold, but it was clean, washed. The hunt for the source, he said, his voice like iron once more, starts now. The drive back from the pier was a silent, charged thing. The storm had washed the city clean, leaving the streets slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like shattered mirrors. My adrenaline had subsided, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was still wearing Cassian's shirt. I could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips. He didn't drive to the Blue Coin. He drove to a nondescript gray building in the warehouse district, one that looked like a dentist's office from the 1980s. He used a key, not a card, to open a side door, leading me into a room that was the exact opposite of his hotel suite. It was functional. 3 desks, 3 powerful-looking computers, and one wall covered in large, high-resolution maps of the Charleston harbor. My logistics hub, he said, gesturing to the setup. The Circle's brain. It's clean, it's quiet, and it has the processing power we need. He plugged the slim hard drive into a dedicated tower. You're the analyst, he said, pulling a chair out for me. Analyze. The encryption was good, military grade, but it wasn't designed to hold up against a brute force attack from a system like this. Cassian initiated the program, and we watched. It was like watching a glacier move. We didn't talk. I made a pot of stale, bitter coffee I found in a tiny kitchenette, and we drank it black. After an hour, or maybe it was 3, time had lost all meaning. A green access granted flashed on the screen. My fingers flew over the keyboard. Cassian stood behind me, his hand resting on the back of my chair, his presence a heavy, warm weight. The drive was a rat's nest, a labyrinth of shell companies. The Crescent Eastern Institute was just the front door. I clicked through the files, my pulse quickening. He's not just a forger, Cassian, I murmured, pulling up a digitally signed document. The Institute is a legal entity, a registered LLC. But look, I followed the incorporation papers. The registered agent for the Institute wasn't a person, it was another company. The Coastal Integrity Bureau, I read aloud. A cultural and trade compliance agency, based in Delaware, of course. A shell inside a shell, he rumbled, his voice dark. What else? Everything. I opened a folder labeled Project Rook. My blood went ice cold. It was us. It was him. Inside were invoices, fake ones, bills for linguistic consultation, artistic sourcing, and discretion services. And then I saw the money trail, a cascade of transfers, hopping from the Bureau to the Institute, then to an offshore account, and then the final destination, a series of deposits totaling over $600,000 into a primary account belonging to the Marrow Syndicate. "There it is," I said, pointing. "He didn't just hire a ghost, he funded him. This was a Marrow operation from the beginning." But there was more. Another folder. This one was labeled Contingency. I opened it. It was full of video files, raw footage. I clicked one. My stomach dropped. It was security footage, date-stamped from 6 years ago, from a bar I didn't recognize. Cassian, he looked younger, harder. The iron he'd described. He was in a heated argument with a man. He shoved the man hard. I clicked another, a parking garage. Cassian again, disarming a man, breaking his wrist. It was efficient, brutal, and silent, just like the alley fight. I clicked a third, a fourth. They were all the same. Short, soundless clips of him in compromising, violent situations. But they were all defensive. In every single one, he was being attacked first. "They've been collecting this for years," I whispered, horrified. "But they never used it." Cassian's hand tightened on my chair. "No, because it was incomplete. It was just Act 1. He stared at the screen, at his own younger, angry self, the tattoo the bathhouse attendant that was Act 2. His realization hit me like a physical blow. "The alley," I said, "the cameras, they weren't trying to start a file on you. They were trying to finish it." "Yes," he growled. "They insult me. They brand me. They leak the story of the tattoo to the docs, make me a joke. I get angry. I get reckless. I go hunting for the source Silas, or someone like him. And Marrow's men are waiting, not to kill me, just to provoke me, to get that one clip." He paced the room, his energy a vibrating, dangerous thing. "They get me on camera angry, violent, attacking, and they cut it together with all of this." He waved at the screen. "They released the Cassian Voss story, a decade of violence, culminating in a paranoid, furious boss losing his mind over a tattoo. They'd have destroyed my credibility. The circle runs on stability. My partners, the independent lines they'd have scattered. Marrow would have picked up the pieces in a week." "But they failed," I said. "You didn't give them the clip. You were water." His eyes met mine. "No, you gave me the strategy. Silence." He looked back at the screen. "But they're sloppy. They got the footage, but they left the drive." "They didn't just leave the drive," I said, my analyst brain clicking back into gear. I went back to the bureau files. A shell company this complex, running this much money, it can't be purely digital. They have to have a physical, a backup, a nexus, a place where the paper meets the code. I started digging, not in the files, but in the data around the files, the metadata, the digital breadcrumbs. "What are you looking for?" "An IP address, a geolocator, a printer, routing number, anything that ties this digital ghost to a physical place." I found it, tucked into the properties of a scanned invoice from the Coastal Integrity Bureau, a routing prefix, a specific, dedicated network node. It was old tech, something a paranoid accountant would use because he thought it was untraceable. I ran it through a public network database. It wasn't a corporate office. It wasn't a bank. "The Salt Lantern Repository," I said, my heart starting to pound. It's a used bookstore, downtown on King Street." "A front," C. Cassian said, grabbing his keys. "Marrow always did love to hide in plain sight." The Salt Lantern Repository smelled like my college library, a comforting, dry dust scent of acidic paper, old leather bindings, and floor wax. It was all towering, dark wood shelves and dim, green-shaded lamps. It was also completely empty, save for a single man behind a massive oak counter. He was in his 50s, with a wild halo of gray hair, and was wearing a pair of enormous old-school headphones, the kind with the coiled cord. He was air drumming, completely oblivious to us. Cassian took a step toward him, ready to intimidate. "Wait," I whispered, pulling on his arm. I pointed. On the wall behind the librarian, in a cheap, crooked frame, was a piece of paper. It was a haiku, printed in ugly calligraphy, with a bad English translation underneath. Green willow branches. The river is very cold. Spring is here at last. It's awful, I murmured. It's a poem. Lila, we're here for the files. No, I insisted. It's wrong. It's a mangled translation of Basho. And the Kureji, the cutting word, it's for autumn, not spring. He's got the entire seasonal reference backward. I grabbed a notes pad from the counter, pulled Cassian's fountain pen from his pocket, an act that felt shockingly intimate, and scribbled, Kare eda ni karasu, no tomari keri aki no kure. On a withered branch, a crow has alighted nightfall in autumn. I slid the note onto the counter, right in the librarian's line of sight, and tapped it. He looked up, annoyed. He read my note. His eyes widened. He read the framed poem on his wall. He read my note again. A look of profound, academic horror crossed his face. He ripped the headphones off. This is Aki no Kure, not Yanagi. I've had this up for 10 years, he sputtered. I'm a fraud. It's a common mistranslation, I said gently. The publisher probably just liked the willow image. He looked at me like I had just handed him a winning lottery ticket. You read it, the original. Are you from the university? Just a researcher, I said. My colleague and I were hoping to access the repository archives, the pre-war shipping manifests. Yes, of course. He was buzzing with gratitude. The archive is in the sub-basement. No one ever goes down there. They just want new books. He sniffed, disgusted. Right through that door. I'll buzz you in. Take all the time you need, thank you. My God, autumn. He hit a button under the counter. A staff-only door clicked open. We stepped through into a dark, musty-smelling concrete stairwell, the service tunnel. A haiku, Cassian said, his voice echoing in the stairwell. He sounded impressed. You disarmed him with a poem. Silence beats noise, I said, my hand closing around the wooden rook under my shirt. Your words. The sub-basement was a tomb of forgotten paper, miles of rolling metal shelves, packed with dusty, string-tied bundles of ledgers and books. We followed the dim, caged lights to the back. There it was. Not a vault, just a single, heavy, fireproof steel door. It was unmarked, locked. Now what? I asked. Cassian was already inspecting the frame, looking for a keypad, a lock. Now, I open it. Wait. I looked at the wall next to the door. It was empty. Except for one thing, a cheap, framed travel poster. It was a photograph of a beautiful, arching red bridge over a harbor. The text at the bottom, upside down, read, Yokohama Port. It was hung upside down, deliberately. The haiku, I said, thinking aloud. It was wrong. It was disrespectful to the art. This is disrespectful. It's an internal signal. A signal for what? A test. I reached out and, my heart pounding, I carefully unhooked the poster. I turned it right side up and hung it back on the nail. For a second, nothing. Then, a heavy, oiled click echoed from the steel door. It wasn't unlocked, it was unlatched. Cassian pulled it open. The room inside was small, climate-controlled, and immaculate. It was a bunker lined with gray, metal filing cabinets. This was the paper trail. This was the analog backup. Marrow Syndicate, Cassian said, pulling open a drawer. Shipping. Payroll. I'm looking for Crescent, I said, moving to a different cabinet. I ran my fingers along the tabs. Contracts, clients, consultations. I pulled a drawer. And there it was, a single, thin manila folder. The label was handwritten, Project Rook C. Voss. My hands were shaking. I opened it. It wasn't a thick file. It was just 2 pieces of paper. The first was a fax from over 6 years ago. It was from Cassian, sent from the hotel in Yokohama. It was a handwritten request in his strong, angular script, a note to his partner, the one who betrayed him, telling him to commission the tattoo. It had the artist's contact, and at the bottom, the requested phrase. It wasn't unyielding fate. I stared at the characters, my breath catching in my throat. Shin hagang ninaru. Kokoro wa minato ni naru? What? Cashin's voice was right behind me, rough. What is it? I traced the characters, my voice a whisper. The heart becomes a harbor. That was the original phrase. I turned to look at him. He wasn't there. He was gone. He was standing in a cold metal room, but his eyes were 6 years and 10,000 miles away, in an alley in Yokohama. The blood had drained from his face. She said that, he whispered. The words sounded torn from him. The interpreter. The night I was cut. She said it to me. Don't be iron, let your heart become a harbor, a place to rest, not a fortress. He had tried to ink the last words of the woman he'd lost onto his skin. And his partner, the man he'd trusted, had taken that and given it to Marrow. And Marrow had twisted that sacred memory into a joke, a bathhouse attendant. The cruelty of it was absolute. It was suffocating. Cassian, I started. The other one, he bit out, his voice like shattered glass. What's the other paper? I picked it up. It was an internal memo from the Coastal Integrity Bureau. It was the change order. It had the original phrase crossed out, and beside it, in neat, precise, angry handwriting, was the new phrase, the joke. And at the bottom of the memo, a signature, an approval for the change. K. Nash. I looked at Cassian. Who is K. Nash? Nash? He took the paper from my hand. His own was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, pure rage I had not seen yet. Kenneth Nash. He's not a thug. He's not a ghost. He looked at me, his gray eyes the color of a winter storm. He's Marrow's accountant, his numbers man, the brain behind all of this. We have it, I said, my voice trembling. We have the proof, the original request, the change order, the signature. We have him. I grabbed the fax and the memo. I looked around, frantic. On a shelf, I saw a stack of heavy, cardboard shipping tubes. I grabbed one, a waterproof one meant for blueprints, unscrewed the cap, and carefully rolled the 2 precious, damning pieces of paper inside. I sealed it. We have to go, I said, clutching the tube to my chest. We have the whole bape, bape, bape. It wasn't a loud alarm. It was a high-pitched, insistent, digital sound. It wasn't coming from our room. It was coming from the stairwell. A silent alarm. Someone else was in the building. Someone had triggered a different sensor. They know we're here, Cassian said. His rage vanished, replaced by that cold, sharp, water-like focus. He grabbed my arm. Not the way we came in. There's a freight elevator. Back here. He pulled me out of the bunker, through a maze of shelves. I could hear footsteps now, heavy, pounding down the concrete stairs. There. He slammed his hand on a large, greasy button. A metal cage elevator at the end of the aisle groaned, its doors scraping open. We piled in. He hit the button for G ground. The doors started to close, too slow. A man in a dark suit appeared at the end of the aisle. Not a librarian, one of Marrow's. He saw us. He didn't shout. He just raised his hand, pointing. The doors thudded shut. The elevator groaned, lurching upward. It was old, slow. They'll be at the top waiting for us. I panted, my back against the cage. No, Cassian said. They'll be in the lobby. This opens into the loading dock, in the alley. The elevator shuddered, scraped, and stopped. The doors opened with an agonizing screech. We were in the alley behind the bookstore. It was dark, empty. Rain was starting to fall again. Go, he yelled, shoving me forward. We ran. I was clumsy in my old server shoes, my feet slipping on the wet pavement, the heavy cardboard tube clutched in my hand. The coop was 30 yards away. I saw the alley entrance, freedom, and I slipped. My ankle twisted on a loose cobblestone. I didn't fall, but I stumbled, a hard, forward lurch, my arms windmilling, the tube flying from my grasp. I never hit the ground. An arm like a steel bar clamped around my waist, yanking me back against a chest that was solid iron. Cassian caught me. He didn't even slow down. He just absorbed me, one-handed. his other hand scooping the tube from the air before it hit the pavement. He had me. He had the proof. We burst out of the alley and piled into the car, the doors slamming, the engine roaring to life. We sat there for a second, panting. The sound of the idling engine and the frantic thwack-thwack of the wipers filling the car. My heart was pounding so hard I felt sick. I was still pinned against him, his arm locked around my waist. The cardboard tube was pressed between us. I looked down. My hand was on his chest, his hand was on the tube, and my other hand, it was clamped tight, white-knuckled, around his wrist. He looked at my hand, then at me. He didn't let go. And neither did I. Back at the logistics hub, the air was vibrating. Cassian was coiled, a spring wound so tight I thought his bones might crack. He was staring at the name on the memo K. Nash and I could see the iron returning to his eyes. He was ready to hunt, ready to break something. "I'll find him," he said, his voice a low, grinding thing. "I'll find Nash, and I'll tear this entire syndicate apart from the inside out." No. He stopped, his head snapping toward me. The fury in his eyes was a physical force. "You'll do that," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding, "and you'll prove them right. You'll be the monster on their video clips. You'll be the iron. You'll be exactly what Marrow wants." He twisted her words. "Lila, he put a price on a memory." "I know." I stepped in front of him, forcing him to see me, to break his gaze from the name. "So we don't tear him down. We expose him. We don't use your weapons. Cassian, we use his." I tapped the file on the drive labeled Contingency. Marrow built this entire thing, the Crescent Institute, the Coastal Integrity Bureau, to create a false story, a public lie. So we're going to use it to tell the truth. We're going to flip the script. He was listening. The iron was still there, but the water was returning, listening for a new current. "Where?" he asked. I smiled. It felt sharp and dangerous and not at all like a Waitress. On his stage, the one he's already building. I turned to the wall map, Eto, which had a calendar of city events. I tapped a date, this Saturday, 2 days from now. The Harbor Jubilee, the biggest night on the docks, food, music, and this year, for the first time, a live Voice of the Port media stream, sponsored by, I traced the logo, a new community business sponsor, the Marrow Syndicate. His eyes lit with a cold fire. He's going to do it then. He's going to leak the tattoo story, lure me there, and spring his trap in front of the entire city. "Exactly," I said. "He's built the stage, he's aimed the cameras, and he's invited the audience. He thinks he's the director, but he's not. We are." The plan was a heist, but we weren't stealing money. We were stealing a narrative. The Harbor Jubilee was a beautiful, chaotic mess. 1,000-watt sensory overload. The air was thick with the competing smells of sweetgrass baskets, fried shrimp and sugar-dusted funnel cakes. String lights were draped between the masts of docked schooners, casting a magical, hazy glow over the crowds. And everywhere were people with phones, live streamers, tourists, local news bloggers. This was Marrow's media circus. Our booth was small, tucked between a caricature artist and a woman selling seashell jewelry. It was perfect. The banner above it, hand-painted by me, read, "The Calligraphy Exchange, Find Your Word." It was my stage. I had a table, a set of beautiful brushes, an inkstone, and stacks of creamy rice paper. Rhodes the Mountain from the restaurant, the one with the quiet, intelligent eyes, had been with me all afternoon. He and his team, all wearing matching black Jubilee Tech Crew polos, hadn't just set up my booth, they'd wired it. A tiny, pinprick microphone was clipped to my shirt, its receiver routed to the main AV tent which they were running. A high-definition camera was discreetly built into the booth's frame. Aimed at my demonstration table, my cultural exhibit was now a broadcast-quality studio. For 2 hours, I just worked. I wrote people's names in katakana. I showed kids how to hold a brush. I explained the difference between ocean and river to tourists. I was Lila the calligraphy girl, harmless and academic. Then, at 9 o'clock, Just as the crowd peaked, he arrived. Cassian Voss. He didn't walk in with an entourage. He walked in like a tourist, a guest. He ditched the suit and was wearing a simple, dark linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, approachable, and devastatingly handsome in the warm, magical light. He drifted through the crowd, bought a bottle of water, and then he stumbled upon my booth. "Well, well," he said, his voice just loud enough for my microphone to catch it. "I've been looking for one of these." The crowd around us thickened, drawn to him like moths. They recognized him. The Rook. Whispers started. Phones were raised. This was the moment. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice calm, professional. "I think so," he said. He smiled, a charming, easy smile. "I have this piece. I've had it for years, and I've always been told it means one thing, but lately I've had my doubts." He leaned forward, laying his forearm flat on my demonstration table, right under the bright light and the eye of my hidden camera. The bathhouse attendant tattoo, sharp, black, and wrong. A collective gasp went through the crowd. This was theater. "I'd be happy to take a look," I said. I picked up my smallest brush. I didn't touch his skin. I just hovered the tip over the ink, my other hand gesturing. "This is a common issue, actually," I said, my voice clear, projecting to the dozens of phones now pointed at us. "The artistry is beautiful. The application is flawless. But the language is incorrect." I pointed to the final, corrupted character. You see, in Japanese, the characters are built from components called radicals. They're the soul of the word. This character, it's supposed to be fukutsu, unyielding. It should use the axe, radical, a symbol of strength. But this artist, they used a different set of strokes. They accidentally wrote bathhouse. The crowd laughed. It was a nervous, tittering sound. "It's not their fault," I said quickly, putting on my best teacher voice. "It's a mistake that happens when you're copying a shape, not reading a language. It's a mistake of translation, not artistry." And then they arrived. Like sharks smelling blood. 4 men, wearing official-looking Voice of the Port media vests, pushed through the crowd, their large, professional-grade cameras shoved forward, Marrow's crew. They were beaming this live, straight to the Jubilee's main jumbotrons, which were positioned all over the harbor. Ma'am," one of them shouted, shoving a microphone in my face. "Are you saying Cassian Voss, the head of the Rook Circle, has a typo on his arm?" This was the hook. The public humiliation. I smiled, a bright, sweet, academic smile. I looked right into the lens of his camera. "A typo, no. A typo is a keystroke. This is a matter of professional integrity. This is a failure of cultural appraisal. In fact," I said, my voice ringing with false sincerity, "I've heard this entire piece was sourced and verified by a consulting group, the Coastal Integrity Bureau. I believe I was hoping they'd have a representative here tonight. I'd love to have a professional discussion with them, to compare our source materials. Gentlemen, is anyone from the Bureau here?" I scanned the crowd. The cameras panned, looking for the expert I had just called out. Silence. The crowd murmured. The streamers were all whispering into their phones. "Coastal Integrity Bureau, who?" "No," I said, my face a mask of disappointment. "Oh, well, that's a shame, because I brought my homework." From under the table, I pulled the waterproof tube from the repository. "This is a heist of public opinion, Lila. Rhodes had said to me an hour ago, you can't just win, you have to show, you have to give them a better story." I unrolled the first document, the fax, the original request, from Yokohama. I held it up to my hidden camera, and I knew Rhodes was pushing the feed to the jumbotrons. "This," I said, "is the original request, the one Mr. Voss sent from Japan over 6 years ago." I pointed to the characters. This is what he actually wanted. Shin Hagang Ninaru. Kokoro wa Minato ni naru. I looked at Cassian. It was his cue. He stepped back, his face no longer the charming tourist. He was the Rook. He looked past the cameras, at the entire harbor, at the thousands of people watching. He took a breath, and he read the words. His Japanese was perfect, slow, measured, and aching with a history I was the only other person in the world to understand. Kokoro wa minato ni naru. The heart becomes a harbor. The crowd was dead silent. The phrase hung in the air, beautiful and melancholic. And then a new sound, faint, tinny static, and then a voice, a woman's voice. Mo ichido, Cassian-san, kokoro, so, kokoro. Once more, Mr. Cassian, heart, yes, heart. My head snapped to the tech tent, Rhodes. He was at the mixing board, his face impassive. He'd found it. He'd found an old personal file, a language lesson from Yokohama. He was patching in the audio. He was giving the voice of the ghost of her to the entire city. Cassian's eyes closed. Just for a second, he was exposed, vulnerable. And in that second, he was more powerful than I had ever seen him. He wasn't iron, he was the entire ocean. The lead cameraman was sputtering, his face red. He'd lost the narrative. This is a trick. He's Marrow get Mister. Marrow on the line. He has the real story. A second Jumbotron flickered to life. A face appeared. A slick, pale man in an expensive suit, sitting in a dark office. Marrow. He looked furious. "This is a joke," he snarled, his voice booming over the speakers. "You want the real Cassian Voss? You want to see what your harbor really is? Roll the damn tape?" He was calling for the violence clips. The main screen, which had been showing Cassian's face, flickered. It went to black. "Uh-oh," the cameraman said, a smug grin spreading. "Technical difficulties." The screen didn't stay black. It flashed with a new image, a flowchart, a complex map of logos, arrows, and bank account numbers. My flowchart, the one I'd built from the encrypted drive. What is that?" Marrow stammered from his screen. "That's not shut it down, shut it down." But Rhodes had the signal. The audio was mine now, too. My voice being piped across the harbor. "That," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "is the Coastal Integrity Bureau and the Crescent Institute, and that is the money. Over $600,000 flowing from those two ghost companies directly into the Marrow Syndicate." I held up the second document, the memo. "And that is the signature of K. Nash, Marrow's accountant, the man who personally approved the bathhouse attendant joke. This wasn't a mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a smear campaign, a deliberate, funded, fraudulent attack. He didn't just twist the ink. He tried to poison a man's legacy." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just murmuring, it was a roar. The streamers were shouting, their feeds exploding. Marrow's face on the screen was a mask of pure fury. "This is slander. Lies. I'll have the police. I'll have you arrested for—" "The police," a new voice boomed. A group of people were moving through the crowd. They weren't cops. They wore no uniforms. They were dock workers, shrimpers, freight managers. They were older, tough, and they carried an authority that no badge could give. At their lead was an older woman with sharp eyes and gray hair in a tight bun. "The Portwatch Guild doesn't take kindly to smear campaigns. Mr. Marrow," she said, her voice amplified by Rhodes. "We're here to ensure a fair hearing, and it seems to us Miss Moreno has provided her source materials. Where are yours?" She turned to me, and her eyes, though hard, were full of respect. "The floor is yours, Miss Moreno." Marrow's screen went black. He was gone. The cameramen were surrounded, not by cops, by the community, the people of the port. They weren't violent, they just stood, a silent, unmovable wall. The crew lowered their cameras. The crowd they were cheering, they were applauding, for me, for Cassian. He hadn't thrown a punch, he hadn't drawn a weapon, he had just stood there and let the truth be told. He walked over to me, his face unreadable in the flashing lights. He stood in front of me, blocking out the world. "The heart becomes a harbor," he murmured, his voice for me alone. "A place to rest," I whispered back. He took my hand, the one not holding the documents, and gave it a single, hard squeeze, a squeeze that said, "Thank you," a squeeze that said, "We won." Rhodes and his team were already packing up, fading back into the shadows. The guild was calmly escorting Marrow's humiliated camera crew off the premises. We had done it. We'd won the public war. "It's over," I breathed, sagging against the table, the adrenaline finally leaving me. Cashin's hand was still holding mine. His grip was still tight. I looked up. The smile was gone. His eyes were once again that cold, winter gray. He was looking past me, into the dark water, at the shadow of Marrow's retreat. "No, Lila," he said, his voice a low, cold warning. "He just lost his noise. Now, he'll be silent." He turned his gaze back to me, and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. "He lost the public fight, so he'll make it personal. The big storm, it's not over, it's just getting started. And he's not aiming at me anymore. He's aiming at you." The adrenaline from the jubilee faded on the drive, leaving a cold, hollow space in my chest. Cassian's words, "He's aiming at you," echoed with every thwack of the windshield wipers. The coupe was a silent capsule, plunging through the back roads of Charleston, away from the harbor, away from the city lights, away from everything I knew. He didn't take me to my apartment. He didn't take me to the hotel. We drove for 20 minutes, turning off paved roads onto gravel, then off gravel onto a rutted dirt path I never would have seen. The air grew thick with the smell of pluff mud and salt marsh. We were in the heart of the mangroves, a dense, dark forest of roots and water. The car stopped. There was no garage. There was just a house. It wasn't a house, it was a cabin. Rook's Rest, he called it. It was built on high stilts, a dark shape against the darker sky, hidden by a canopy of live oaks and hanging moss. It was invisible. It was safe. Inside, it was one large room, all warm, dark wood and soft, low light. It smelled like cedar and old books. A wall of windows faced the black, winding creek. This wasn't the logistics hub. This wasn't the hotel. This was his... "You're a target now, Lila," he said, his voice flat as he locked the heavy wooden door behind us. "Marrow lost the public battle. He won't make that mistake again. He'll go quiet, and he'll go for you." "So this is a prison?" I asked, my voice trembling, my hand instinctively going to the wooden rook under my shirt. He turned, his face softening in the warm light. "No, it's a sanctuary. No one knows this place exists. Not Marrow, not even most of my own men." He walked past me into a small but functional kitchen. "You're hungry." It wasn't a question. I realized I hadn't eaten since I couldn't remember. My stomach clenched. "I found some clams," he said, pulling a mesh bag from an old-fashioned icebox. "Chowder." I just nodded, numb. A mafia boss, the Rook, was going to make me soup. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble in my throat. I can help." I offered, needing to do something with my hands. A waitress was in a kitchen. This should be my element. It was not. He put a heavy pot on the stove, set out an onion, some potatoes, and a sprig of thyme. "Chop," he said, handing me a knife. I was clumsy. My server hands were trained to carry, to balance, to polish. They were not trained for prep. The onion pieces were uneven. The potato cubes were a disaster. I was a fraud. "You're holding your tension in your shoulders," he said. I jumped. He was standing right behind me. I hadn't heard him move. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His proximity was overwhelming. "You're forcing it," he said, his voice a low rumble, right by my ear. "Let the knife do the work, like this." He put his hand over mine. My breath hitched. His hand was huge, calloused, and surprisingly warm. He wasn't gripping me. He was guiding me. He moved my hand, showing me the rocking motion. The blade suddenly found its rhythm. Thunk, thunk, thunk. "See," he murmured, "water, not iron." He stayed there, his chest a solid wall against my back, his arm encircling me, his hand over mine. We chopped the entire potato like that, in a silence that was more intimate than any conversation. The steam from the pot rose around us, smelling of thyme and the sea. I was leaning back into him before I even realized I was doing it. We ate sitting on a worn leather sofa, the bowls of chowder balanced on our knees. He'd put on music, not jazz, something older, a scratchy vinyl of a lone saxophone, mournful and slow. "You've barely said 10 words since we left the Jubilee," he said, staring into his bowl. "I'm processing," I said. "A few days ago. My biggest worry was whether Table 4 was going to stiff me on a tip because his steak was overcooked. Now I'm on the run from a crime syndicate because I can read Japanese. It's a lot." I set my bowl down, the spoon clattering. I used to hate that, the customers, the rude ones. He looked up, his gray eyes focused. "The ones who wouldn't look at me," I continued, the words spilling out. "The ones who snapped their fingers. The ones who called me sweetheart or smiley and treated me like I was deaf and stupid. I spent 3 years being invisible, being less." I looked at him, at this impossible man, and then I met you. You're the most dangerous man I've ever known, and you're the only person in God in so long who's actually looked at me, who's listened. You saw my brain. He didn't say anything. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, but his gaze was heavy. He wasn't just listening, he was absorbing. It was the softest I had ever seen him. The rain started, a slow, soft patter at first, then a steady, insistent drumming on the metal roof. It was the same sound from the shipping container, but this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a blanket. We moved to the window, sitting on the wide wooden bench, watching the creek turn silver in the storm. We sat in silence for a long time, the saxophone and the rain weaving a spell around us. I was so tired, the fear, the adrenaline, the victory, the new dreaded had all hollowed me out. I found my hand moving, seeking an anchor. I placed it flat on his chest, over his heart, just like I had in the container. It was slow, steady, thump-do, thump, a solid, living rhythm in the chaos. He looked down at my hand, then he took it, not to move it, but to hold it. He turned my palm over and, very slowly, his eyes still on mine, he pressed his lips to my knuckles, one by one. It wasn't a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of respect, an oath. "I don't want you to fight alone anymore, Cassian," I whispered, the words torn from a place I didn't know I had. Not Marrow, not Kay, Nash, not the ghost from Yokohama. You're not iron, you're not just water. You're a harbor. But you don't have to be the only ship in it. His eyes closed. A single, shuddering breath escaped him. He didn't pull me. He didn't grab me. He just opened. He leaned in. And I met him halfway. He responded with an embrace that was absolute. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was a slow, crushing, desperate holding. He buried his face in my hair, one hand splayed wide against my back, the other cradling my head, as if he was trying to pull me into his own bones, to keep me safe by sheer force of will. He murmured my name, Lila, and the sound was a prayer. When he finally pulled back, he didn't let go. His hands framed my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. The kiss from the container had been a question, a discovery. This was an answer. It was a deliberate, conscious claiming. His mouth found mine, and the world dissolved. It was no longer a question of if. It was now. My hands found the back of his neck, my fingers tangling in his short, thick hair, pulling him closer. His thumb traced the sensitive line of my jaw, and a shudder ran through me. He broke the kiss, but only to press his forehead to mine. Our breath mingled, hot and shaky. "Lila," he whispered, "a final check, a final offer of an out." My answer was to tilt my head, closing the last fraction of an inch, and kiss him again. This time, there was fire. It was the heat of 6 years of betrayal, of a lifetime of being iron. It was the desperation of a man who had forgotten what it felt like to not be alone. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of his linen shirt, needing to feel the steady beat of his heart under my palm again. His hand slid from my face, down my shoulders, to my waist, pulling me tight against him. The kiss deepened, becoming a silent, hungry language of its own. It was a promise a vow, a surrender. His shirt, the one he had lent me in the container, the one I was still wearing, it pooled on the floor by the bench. His lips left mine, tracing a path of fire down my throat to the hollow of my collarbone, and I arched back, a soundless gasp escaping me. The sensation of his skin against mine was electric, a shudder of a breath drawn. My hands mapped the strong, smooth plane of his back, feeling the muscles tense and shift under my palms. He moved, lifting me as if I weighed nothing, and in one fluid motion, we were on the thick rug in front of the window, the rain a wild symphony outside. He stopped, his weight braced on his arms above me, his gray eyes burning in the dim light. He was looking at me, seeing me in a way that left me completely, terrifyingly exposed, and I had never felt so safe. I reached up, my hand tracing the scar on his jaw. He didn't flinch. I pulled him down, and the world washed away in the sound of the rain. Later, I don't know how much later, I lay beside him, my head on his chest, my fingers tracing the outline of the ink on his arm. The rain had softened to a gentle, steady patter. The saxophone was still playing. He was silent for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. "I've never been afraid of anything," he whispered, his voice rough. I waited. Not of marrow, not of the Yakuza, not of dying. He took a deep, shaky breath, his arm tightening around me, pulling me closer. "I'm terrified of losing you." The confession hung in the small, warm room. It was the rawest, most honest thing I had ever heard. He wasn't afraid of the violence. He was afraid of the silence that would come after. My fingers traced the corrupted characters, the bathhouse attendant. "You won't," I said. "He poisoned this. He took her memory and he twisted it." I looked up at him, at his tired, guarded face. "So we'll fix it. We'll take it back. We won't cover it. We'll rewrite it. We'll ink the heart becomes a harbor right over it. We'll make the truth so bright, the lie just becomes a shadow, a scar, not the story." He looked down at his arm, at my fingers, and for the first time, I saw the ice in his eyes melt, completely. A sharp digital buzz cut through the stillness. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the vinyl. It was his phone, abandoned on the kitchen counter. Cassian was on his feet in a second, his body instinctively shielding mine, all the iron slamming back into place. He grabbed his phone. He looked at the screen. I saw every muscle in his body go rigid. "What?" I said, sitting up, clutching the shirt to my chest. "What is it?" He showed me the screen, a new text, from an encrypted, unknown number. It was short, 4 lines. "Tomorrow night, midnight, Pier 9, the file for the ghost, 141, K, Nash." "The ghost," I whispered. "He Akiyama, the tattoo artist. Nash is offering to trade the man who tattooed you for the file we took from the repository." "It's a trap," Cassian said, his voice flat. He was already pulling on his clothes. The boss was back. "He's cleaning house," I said, my mind racing. "He's going to get rid of the ghost and get his evidence back. Or he's going to get rid of us." "He's not going to get rid of you," Cassian said. He walked over, his face a mask of cold resolve. "You're staying here. I'm handling this. I'm ending this." I stood up. I let his shirt, my only armor, fall to the floor. I stood in front of him, meeting his gaze, my fear burned away by a cold, hard anger of my own. "No, Lila, this isn't a debate. This is the end. This is the violent part. This is what I do." "You're not going alone, Cassian," I said, my voice as hard as his. "You're not the only one he tried to destroy. He took your past. He's trying to take my future. You're the rook. I'm the analyst. You're the water. I'm the one who reads the currents." I stepped closer, close enough to touch him. "This started with a lie, a knot of tangled words. I'm the only one who can unpick it. You and me, we go together." I stared into his stormy gray eyes, and I didn't back down. "This knot," I said, "belongs to both of us." The sanctuary of Rook's Rest felt 1,000 miles away. We were back in the logistics hub. The brain and the air was no longer soft with rain and saxophone. It was sharp, brittle, and smelled of ozone and stale coffee. The clock on the wall was a tyrant, each second a heavy click toward midnight. Rhodes, the bodyguard I'd mentally labeled Mountain 2, was at the main console, his quiet presence now revealed as the core of the Circle's operations. He was a tech operator, a field agent, and a strategist, all hidden behind that impassive face. Pier 9, Cashin said, his voice flat. He was staring at the harbor map, a high-resolution satellite image of the container field. It's a kill box. Nash wants us in the open. He'll have sightlines from the gantry cranes. He's sloppy, I said, my voice tight. I was clutching the waterproof tube from the repository. He's desperate. He's trying to clean up his mess. He'll trade the ghost Akiyama to get this file. Cassian didn't look up from the map. He's not sloppy. He's arrogant. There's a difference. He'll have men. Marrow's men, Rhodes said, his voice a low monotone. They'll be waiting for you to get the asset, and then they'll move in. They'll try to wipe the board. Then we changed the board, I said. Both men turned to look at me. The waitress was gone. The analyst was in charge. He's expecting you. Cassian, the rook. The iron, he's expecting a violent armed extraction. He's counting on it. He wants to film it. He's trying to get the clip he failed to get in the alley. I walked to the map. So you don't go. Not at first, I do. No, Cashin said. It was an absolute final command. Yes, I countered, just as absolute. You're the target, I'm the bait, but I'm also the weapon. He's an accountant. He thinks I'm a girl, a secretary. He's arrogant. He'll want to gloat. He'll want to prove he's smarter than the cultural consultant who beat him at the Jubilee. I'm not going in as a hostage. I'm going in as the editor, here to correct his work. The air crackled. I was challenging him. She's right, Rhodes said, his eyes on his screen. He'll be watching you. Boss, he won't be watching her, not in the same way. She's the only one who can get close. Cassian stared at me, his jaw working. I saw the battle in his eyes, the protector versus the strategist. The strategist won. A plan, he bit out, now. We built it. It was a heist layered in concentric rings. The Portwatch Guild, I said. They're the outer ring. They're not fighters. They're the community. Rhodes. You call the woman from the Jubilee. You tell her, Kay, Nash is trying to bring his fraud back to the harbor. They'll lock down the access roads. They'll watch. They become the audience Marrow can't control. Done, Rhodes said. The Circle. Cassian took over, his voice like iron. Inner ring, my men. 2-man teams. We go in dark. We take the gantries. We take the high ground. We are water. No one engages. No one is seen. This is a containment operation. We are there to extract you. On my signal. And the center, I said, me, I go in. I make the trade. I am the editor. The clock was ticking. We had less than 3 hours. The montage began. My first move, I needed my scholarship back. I went to a terminal, my fingers flying, initiating a secure video call. Halfway across the world, my old roommate's face appeared, blurry with sleep. Lila-chan, Julia's voice was thick. It's 3 a.m. here. What's wrong? Are you okay? Julia, I'm so sorry. I wouldn't call if it wasn't, I need your help. I need your professional expertise. Right now. I held the fax up to the camera. The original, beautiful Kokoro wa Minato ni Naru. Then, I held up the high-resolution photo of Cassian's arm. Julia's sleepiness vanished. Her eyes, even through the pixelated feed, sharpened with an academic fury I knew well. She leaned in. This, she whispered, her voice tight with professional offense. Lila, this is not a mistake. This is bake. It's a deliberate, calculated mockery. The stroke order, the radicals, yes. Your analysis of the Chinese keyboard input, it is 100% correct. A native speaker would never make this error. This is an insult. I know, I said. I'm going into a negotiation. I'm going to meet the man who ordered it. I need something official. I need you. Julia's spine stiffened. "Send me the high-resolution files. Now. I have access to the university's linguistic database. I will find the source books for that specific shorthand. I will write a formal authentication, a declaration on university letterhead, proving this is a forgery. I will timestamp it. I will email it to you within the hour." "Julia, thank you. I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing. Lila," she said, a fierce smile on her face. "You are finally using your degree. Go, do the work." The screen went black. As I waited, Cassian stood me in the middle of the room. It was time for my other lesson. "If it turns," he said, his voice low, "you don't talk, you move. These are the signals. No one else will see them, but my men on the high ground will. This," he splayed his hand over his heart. "Hand flat to the chest. It means the target is armed and hostile. Extract me now." I mirrored him. Hand to chest. "This." He ran his hand back through his hair, a quick, nervous-looking gesture. "It means, I'm okay, hold position, I'm in control." I mirrored him, hair. "And this," he tapped his temple twice, with 2 fingers. "It means the asset is here. I have eyes on the ghost, the trade is happening. That's the signal for the circle to move, to lock down the inner perimeter." I practiced, chest, hair, temple. My hands were shaking. He caught my wrist. His grip was firm, grounding. "Steady," he murmured. "Breathe. Don't anticipate. Just react. Be water." "Intel," Rhodes said from the console. We both turned. The guild just reported back. They're in position, but they spotted something. Nash isn't just bringing men. He's bringing eyes and ears. My stomach clenched. "The alley, the cameras." "Worse," Rhodes said. "Drones, small, fast, high-frequency audio receivers. They're going to try and record you again. Lila, they'll try to bait you, get you to say something they can edit. They lost the Jubilee. They're trying to win the audio war, to create a new clip that proves we were the liars. They were trying to reclaim the noise." I looked at the table, at the calligraphy set I'd brought from the Jubilee, the brushes, the inkstone. "Then we fight them with sound," I said. Cassian and Rhodes looked at me. "Rhodes, the mic you're giving me. I don't need it to be loud. I need it to be sensitive. Can you isolate and boost a specific frequency?" "Isolate what?" "The sound of the truth." I grabbed the ink stick and began to grind it in the stone, adding a few drops of water. The room filled with the faint, dry, earthy smell of pine soot. The sound of a real horsehair brush, loaded with pine soot ink, moving across thick cotton fiber rice paper. It has a timbre, a texture, a dry, elegant shh. Their audio will be flat, just voices. Ours will be real. We won't just show them the truth. We'll let the entire harbor hear it. We'll prove authenticity with acoustics. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Rhodes's face. "Acoustic forensics. I can do that. I'll give you a mic that can hear your own heartbeat." The printer word, Julia's declaration, signed, sealed, and damning. It was almost time. Cassian walked to a locked cabinet. He wasn't in his suit. He'd changed. He was wearing dark, flexible tactical pants and a simple, long-sleeved black shirt. No armor, no bulky vest. He was built for speed. He was water, ready to flow. He returned, holding a long, thin box of dark, polished wood. It looked ancient. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of faded red silk, was a single brush. The handle was bamboo, dark with age, worn smooth. My breath caught. "This was hers," he whispered. "The interpreter, from Yokohama. The only thing she left behind." "Cassian," I choked out. "I can't. That's yours." "It's a tool," he said, his voice rough. He took it from the box and placed it firmly in my hand. It was perfectly balanced. "It's meant to write. You're the editor. You're the one who understands it." He closed my fingers around the warm bamboo. "If you have to sign your name to destiny tonight, Lila, you sign your own." We stood by the door, the rest of the room fading away. The clock on the wall was a death knell. This was the lock-in, the moment before the drop. He didn't kiss me. It was too raw, too real for that. He just stepped close, resting his forehead against mine, just as he had in the container. The promise. "I'm not going to promise you a fairy tale, Lila," he whispered, his eyes closed. "I'm not going to promise you we'll be safe." "I'm not here for a fairy tale," I whispered back, my voice shaking. "I'm here for the truth." "Just see it through," he said. "To the end, I promised." He stepped back. I turned to the table, my resolve hardening into steel. I took a roll of white medical gauze. I wrapped it tightly. Around my left wrist, I uncapped a permanent marker, and on the white fabric, over my pulse, I wrote the characters. Shin Hagang Ninaru. The heart becomes a harbor. It wasn't a tattoo. It was a shield. It was a map. It was the why. "One more thing," Rhodes said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "It's done, boss." "What's done?" I asked, pulling my sleeve down over the gauze. "The counter-propaganda," Cassian said, a cold, thin smile touching his lips. "Marrow wanted clips. We'll give him clips." Rhodes turned his monitor. It was a feed of the Voice of the Port blog, the main news hub for the docks. "We pulled all the old violence clips from the dark web caches," Rhodes explained, "scrubbed them, wiped the servers, and replaced them with this." He hit play. It was the footage from the Jubilee, me explaining the radicals, Cassian, his voice clear, reading the poem, the faint, haunting audio of his interpreter's voice, the Port Watch Guild stepping in. Our win, the truth. "By the time Nash gets to the pier, Aunt," Cassian said, "the only story on the street is ours. He's already lost the public war. All he has left is this pier. And he's desperate." We moved. We walked out of the light of the hub and into the dark, damp air of the parking garage. We got in the coupe. The engine was a low, sleeping growl. Cassian just sat there, his hands on the wheel, staring into the darkness. He was a monolith of contained energy. The iron was back. "Cassian," I said, my voice too loud in the small space. I had to know. "This man, K. Nash, you know him from the syndicate." He kept his eyes on the concrete wall. "Yes." You knew him before when you were with Marrow?" "No." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "He wasn't Marrow's accountant," Cassian said, his voice completely flat, dead. I stared at his profile. What do you mean, the file, the signature?" "He's Marrow's accountant now," he said. "He wasn't then." My blood ran cold. I felt the trap closing. Then Cassian. Who was he 6 years ago? Who was he? The coupe pulled out of the garage, sliding into the empty, moonlit streets. We were heading for the water. We were heading for Pier 9. He stopped at a red light. The only light was the angry, artificial red glow filling the car. He turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were not iron. They were not water. They were a black, lightless void. 6 years ago, he said, his voice a blade of ice. "Kay, Nash wasn't Marrow's advisor." The light turned green. He didn't move. "He was mine." The words hit the small, dark cabin of the coupe and shattered the silence. He was mine. The drive to the harbor was a lifetime. Cassian didn't speak again, and I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The story was complete now, a perfect, vicious circle. The betrayal in Yokohama, the loss of the interpreter, his return, his promotion of a new man, a brain. K. Nash. A man he must have trusted, a man he must have told everything, a man he told about the scar, about the woman, about the words she spoke. And Nash had taken that sacred, private memory and sold it to Marrow. He hadn't just betrayed Cassian's business. He had betrayed his soul. Pier 9, midnight. The place was a steel canyon, a tomb of rust and shadows. The wind howled in off the black water, a high, thin, lonely sound. It whipped my hair across my face, tasting of salt and industrial rot. The only light was the sickly, high-pressure sodium lamps, casting everything in a diseased orange glow, making the wet pavement look like liquid steel. I was wired. A tiny, high-fidelity microphone was clipped to my collar. A small, hardened earpiece was my only link to Cassian and Rhodes, who were already gone. Ghosts in the high gantries. "I'm in place," I whispered. I stood in the center of the container field, a single, small figure in a vast, empty arena. I was holding the repository tube, the ancient brush box, and a roll of washi paper. "We see you," Cassian's voice came back, a disembodied static, a ghost in my ear. "You're not alone. I'm on the North Crane. Rhodes is south. We have the exits. Wait for the signal." A single spotlight, mounted on a crane, snapped on. It pinned me like a butterfly. "Lila Moreno, the analyst." The voice was amplified, echoing off the steel walls. It was smooth, educated, and dripping with contempt. A man stepped out of the shadow of a massive container. He wasn't a thug. He was neat. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, thin-rimmed glasses, and leather gloves. He looked like the accountant he was. This was Nash. He was carrying a small, silver briefcase. "You've been impressively busy," he said, walking slowly toward me. He stopped a safe 30 feet away. "You cost my associate, Mr. Marrow, a great deal of public face." "You cost your boss his legacy," I shot back, my voice shaking but sharp. Nash actually laughed, a thin, reedy, humorless sound. "Boss Cassian, oh, no, my dear. He was never the boss. He was the muscle, the iron, the tool. I was the brain. But he never saw that. He just kept me on a leash." He set his briefcase down and opened it. Inside, it wasn't money. It was ink. A bottle of cheap, black ink, a stack of flimsy paper, and a small, razor-sharp paper-cutting knife. "He's sentimental," Nash sneered, "which is why he'll lose. He wants his ghost, his precious Akiyama. Fine, I'll trade." He gestured. Two of Marrow's thugs dragged a third man forward, a hood over his head. "Here's the artist." And in exchange, I asked, "The file from the repository, of course, and a performance." He pulled out a small, professional camera on a tripod and a high-gain microphone. "You're a celebrity now. Miss Moreno, the calligraphy expert. So, you're going to go live, and you're going to publicly reappraise his tattoo. You're not going to call it a mistake this time. You're going to call it what it is, a joke. You're going to humiliate him. You're going to correct the record my way." This was it, the audio trap. "Why?" I asked, my voice carrying in the wind. "Why bathhouse attendant? Of all the insults, why that?" Nash looked at me, his eyes glittering behind his glasses. "You know, he told me about her, the woman in Yokohama. He was pathetic, crying over a memory." He smiled. "A cold, reptilian thing. She told him to be a harbor, a place of rest. I just finished the thought." My blood went cold. "A harbor, a bathhouse, it's all just a place for dirty people to wash up, isn't it?" he hissed. "He thinks he's an ocean. He's a drain. A man like Cassian Voss doesn't deserve a legacy. He deserves to be drowned in the filth he creates." "Lila!" Cassian's voice was a knife in my ear. "Signal, now!" "No," I whispered back. "Hold." I looked at Nash. "You're right, it deserves a correction. Turn on your camera." Nash's eyes widened, then a smug, superior look crossed his face. He hit record. "Go on," he prompted. "Tell the world what a joke he is." A second spotlight hit, not from Nash's crane, from the other side. Cassian. He walked out of the shadows, his hands empty, his face a mask of cold fury. He was water. He was a tsunami. "Knew you couldn't stay away," Cassian, Nash taunted. "Knew you couldn't let your girlfriend do the dirty work." Marrow's men, 6, 7, 8 of them, fanned out, forming a loose circle. They kept their distance, their phones all up, recording. They weren't here to fight. They were here to witness, to get the clip. "You came for the file, Kenneth," Cassian said, his voice a low, deadly calm. "You want to talk about legacy, about truth? Then let's talk." "I have the artist, Cassian. I have the source," Nash shouted. "No," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and amplified by Rhodes's mic. "You don't—" "I do." I put the repository tube on a barrel. I opened the antique wooden box. I set out the inkstone, the washi paper, and I took out the ancient brush. "What is this?" Nash sneered. "Performance art." "This," I said, "is an audit." I hit the signal. "Temple?" Twice. "I have the asset." "Rhodes, are you listening?" I whispered. "We hear you. Lila." Rhodes's voice came back. "The guild stream is live. The whole harbor is listening. We're patched in." I began to grind the ink. The sensitive mic picked up the dry, earthy shh of the stick on the stone. "You're an accountant, Nash," I said, my voice resonating with a cold power I didn't know I possessed. "You're a man of details. You signed off on the Coastal Integrity Bureau. You're the expert, so prove it." I laid a sheet of washi paper on the barrel. "I'm not going to write the joke you wrote. I want you to write the first lie, the one you sold him. Unyielding fate. Suming buku. Show us. Show the world your expertise." He was trapped. His own camera was on. His men were watching. The guild was streaming. To refuse was to admit he was a fraud. He sneered, walked over, and snatched a cheap ballpoint pen from his pocket. "This is absurd." He scribbled the 4 characters on a piece of his own flimsy paper. "The sound of a ballpoint pen on cheap paper?" I narrated, my voice booming across the pier. "The sound of a fraud." I dipped the ancient brush, the sound of the horsehair bristles, full of pine soot ink, touching the cotton fiber washi. It was a deep, resonant hiss. It was the sound of truth. "You're not a scholar," I said, my brush moving, creating the real characters next to his. "You're not even a good forger. Look at your stroke order. You wrote it like an American writing ABC. You have no balance, no soul. You're an amateur." The online stream, fed by the guild, was splitting the screen. My hand, his hand, my sound, his sound. "This is ridiculous," Nash shouted. He'd lost. He knew it. "And you're right," I continued. "He was your boss, and you betrayed him. And this is the proof." I pulled the file from the tube, the fax, the memo, the signature. On the side of the largest container stack, a massive image flickered to life. Rhodes. He was projecting the file for the whole pier, for the whole harbor, to see. There it was. K, Nash's signature, approving the bathhouse joke. The circle of Marrow's men, they faltered. Their phones didn't drop. But they weren't filming Cassian anymore. They were filming Nash. Nash's face was a mask of pure, primal panic. He lost. The brain had been outplayed, so he turned to iron. He lunged, not at Cassian, at me. He grabbed me, yanking me back, the razor-sharp paper-cutting knife pressing against my throat. "Shut it off! Shut it all off!" he screamed. "Lila," Cassian roared. But it was too late. He was water. Cassian didn't hesitate. He didn't lunge. He flowed in one impossible, liquid-fast motion. He was on us. He didn't punch Nash. He grabbed the wrist holding the knife. Oh, he didn't break it. He turned it. A perfect circular Aikido move, using Nash's own momentum. The wrist twisted. The knife fell. It was over in a second. Bizzad. High above us, 4 small, dark shapes activated. The drones. Marrow's last-ditch effort. They weren't trying to film, they were diving. They were kamikazes. They were exploding fly cams, aimed straight at the repository file and at us. "Circle now," Cassian yelled. 4 silent, simultaneous sounds from the gantries, not gunfire. High-velocity projectiles. Rhodes's team, they didn't shoot the drones, they hit them. 1, 2, 3, 4... The drones wobbled, their motors screaming, and crashed into the pavement, exploding in a shower of non-lethal sparks and plastic. But one was too close. Cassian didn't think. He acted. He threw his body in front of mine, shielding me. Just as the last drone shattered, a piece of the plastic casing, sharp as a razor, spun through the air. It caught his shoulder, slicing through his shirt. He didn't flinch. He just stood. A wall. Blood. dark in the orange light, welled and dripped onto the pavement. He was bleeding. For me. The pier was silent. The siege was broken. I stepped out from behind him. I took his bleeding arm, my hand gripping his wrist. I looked at Nash, who was on his knees, defeated, his face a mask of disbelief. "You tried to use words to humiliate him," I said, my voice amplified, echoing across the water. "But you failed. I'm going to use them to liberate him." I let go of Cassian. I grabbed a tattered, forgotten piece of canvas sailcloth from a nearby crate. I dipped the ancient brush. My hand didn't shake. I put the brush to the canvas. Shin Hagang Ninaru. 4 large, powerful characters, dripping with ink and purpose and the salt of the harbor. Marrow's men were gone. They had faded back into the shadows, their leader defeated, their mission a failure. I looked at Cassian. He walked to the canvas. He looked at the words. He looked at me, and he read them. His voice was raw, but it was not broken. Kokoro wa minato ni naru. On the side of the container, a new image, a video feed. Julia, my Julia, live from Tokyo. "It is correct," she said, her voice formal, amplified. "The heart becomes a harbor, a place of rest, a place of strength. It is a phrase of great honor. That," she said, pointing at the canvas, "is the truth." The smear was dead, the lie was broken. From the shadows, the Port Watch Guild emerged, not with guns, with authority. They surrounded the kneeling, broken form of Kay, Nash. The woman with the gray bun nodded to Cassian. "We'll handle the accountant," she said. "It was a civil detainment. No violence. No noise. Just justice." Nash was gone. The ghost Akiyama was being helped by the guild. It was just us, Cassian and me, on a silent pier under the orange lights. Cassian, he sank to one knee, not in supplication. His hand was clamped to his bleeding shoulder. And he laughed. It wasn't the terrifying bark from the restaurant. It was free. It was a sound of a chain, 6 years old, finally breaking. He tilted his head back, and he laughed at the night sky. He looked up at me. His gray eyes, so long full of ice and storms, were clear. "Lila Moreno," he breathed. A smile, a real, genuine smile spreading across his face. You didn't just win. You took a mockery and you turned it into a lighthouse." I fell to my knees in front of him. I put my hand on his face, my thumb tracing the scar. "You're bleeding." "It's just iron," he whispered. He covered my hand with his. "It doesn't matter." I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face in the curve of his shoulder. Not caring about the blood, he held me, his one good arm locking around my waist, holding me as if I was the only solid thing in the world. "We have to fix it," I whispered, my lips against his skin. "The tattoo." "Yes," he said. "We'll keep the scar," I said, tracing the old, wrong lines through his sleeve. "We'll keep the bathhouse attendant, as a reminder." He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. "But we'll write the truth over it," I said, my voice shaking. "We'll have the new ink. The heart becomes a harbor, inked right on top, a new roof, a new light." He didn't say anything, and he just pulled me back. And in the middle of that cold, wet, victorious pier, he kissed me. And it was not a question or an answer. It was a signature. The epilogue was quiet. The Harbor Finch, my old restaurant, has a new room, a private one, the lighthouse. It's where I work. I teach. Calligraphy, yes, but mostly I help people from the harbor translate. Legal documents, medical forms, letters from home. I am an analyst. I am a curator. On Pier 9, there is no more rust. There is a new building, all glass and warm wood, the Charleston Maritime Library for young adults. It was funded by an anonymous donation, but I know the donor. I see him there sometimes. In the evenings, sitting in the stacks, watching the kids read, his face calm in the sunset glow. Tonight, I am at Rook's Rest, but it's not a cabin anymore. We added a new room, a studio, clean, white, and full of light. Cassian is in the chair, a woman, small and precise. Her black hair in a bun is bent over his arm. Her name is Kenna. She was Julia's master instructor. She flew in from Tokyo. I am sitting on the stool next to him. My hand is resting on his knee. His hand is holding mine. The needle hums. It's not a sound of pain. It's a sound of creation. I watch as the new, bold, black ink, the truth settles over the old, faded, angry scar. The old lines are still there, a shadow, but the new ones, the correct ones, they are the story. The heart becomes a harbor. Kenna finishes. She wipes the last of the ink away. It's perfect. Cassian doesn't speak. He just lifts my hand, the one he's holding. He turns it over, and he presses a kiss to the pulse point on my wrist, right where the gauze used to be. He looks at me, his gray eyes no longer a storm, but a calm, deep, safe ocean. My harbor, he whispers. Outside, in the dark, a ship's horn sounds, long and low, a promise of a safe return. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We'd love to know, where in the world are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments below so we can connect, share our thoughts, and build our own harbor right here. Please. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button. It helps more than you know and ensures these stories get heard by as many people as possible.